IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is back, Sean. It's been a minute, right? It's a show we kind of stopped doing during the season because Saturdays are usually kind of busy with, games. But the RTCF show is back. And for those who are new or don't remember, RTCF stands for Recruiting, Notre Dame Team Topics, and College Football Topics. So we'll kind of pick three different topics to discuss, and Sean and I will discuss those. And Sean, we're gonna have some really good ones today, and we're gonna talk in the recruiting section. We're gonna talk about the transfer portal players. You and I have been spent a lot of time in the film room over the last week looking at the kids that are in the class already. Notre Dame right now has 5 transfers committed. You have obviously Sam Hartman. You have Caleb Smith at receiver. You have Thomas Harper. We'll dive into those guys a little bit. And then, of course, you have Spencer Schrader, place kicker, and Ben Grimm as a punter. We will not do film breakdowns of Spencer Schrader and Ben Grimm because we're not kicking specialists. But we'll look at those other 3 kids. And then I also want to look at Byron Vaughns a little bit, who's a kid that visited this past weekend. He's a defensive end Viper player from Utah State. Began his career at Texas. We'll look at him. And then we'll dive into a preview of tonight's championship game between Ohio State. I'm still wishing my predictions. Sean, I was so close. I predicted a 6-point TCU win. I got that. A lot more points than I thought.
Yeah.
And then I predicted Ohio State to win 38-35. If you remember, about 4 minutes left in the game, it was 38-35. And I'm like, man, Ohio State, please make a couple stops because I'm going to look like a freaking genius. And they choked the game away. So Georgia and TCU, we'll preview that game tonight, which is 8 o'clock, I believe, tonight on ESPN. But the main show, Sean, and the reason we are doing this today instead of sort of a recruiting hours, because number one, I want you and Ryan to be able to do recruiting hour. And I made Ryan take the day off today because he had a long week in San Antonio working his butt off. So I said, hey, you haven't seen your family in a while, so go spend some time with your family today. And so Sean and I could do this show, which is why we were going to do it on Saturday, but we decided to do it today. And you had a topic, Sean, that you kind of wanted to kick this thing back off with. And the timing of the Sam Hartman decision and all that was perfect for this because there's a lot of conversation about Sam Hartman and what he means for Notre Dame and a lot of misunderstanding of some comments you've made about Sam Hartman and what you're saying about it. So that's what we're going to kind of dive into today, Sean. So why don't you kick it off kind of with where you're kind of what you want to discuss and what you want to kind of bring up today, and then also get my opinion on today.
Well, man, great to have the show back. Great to be back with my guy. I call him the boss man. He doesn't like that, but great to be back with you guys. And thank you for so much love for the hats. I do this is my favorite IB hat that I have. So I thank Brian Driscoll for sending it to me. This was like the tester, right? When you got the new one, you were like, "Oh man, I got this green one. I want to."
You wanted a green. Well, you wanted a green hat, so I was like, "Okay, let me throw them together." And so, did I send you the other one as well? Don't you have the other green one with the gold on it?
I have the one that you have on today, and the other one. Yes.
So you got those, and I was like, okay, and it just looked so good. I was like, and people loved it, so they were like, "Can I get one of those?" I was like, "Yeah, let's put it in the store."
Yeah.
So it's a sweet hat. Very sweet hat.
So today we're going to start the show. And of course, the topic is going to be Sam Hartman, who transferred into Notre Dame on last week. And as you said, Brian, for me, it goes back to the Gator Bowl, right? Because in order to really get to the topic, we have to go back to the Gator Bowl. And one of the things that I do is I challenge the fan base to elevate their expectations. Anytime something comes up, and you know me, I stand on the hill. I go against Ohio State fan base, Alabama. Like, dude, you can't change what I think about Notre Dame. I don't care if it has been since 1988. We're still Notre Dame and you ain't, as Lou Holtz said. That's not changing. And so I challenge the fan base, no matter what's going on, you have to feel like that your worth and your value as a program is right up there with the best of the programs, other programs in the nation. So when I saw the reaction during the Gator Bowl, when things weren't going so well, when people were posting pictures of a certain quarterback, I felt it was disrespectful to Tyler Butler. And I was like, we're better than that. We don't have to do that. And then, once Sam Hartman decided to officially release that he was transferring to Notre Dame, the fan response was almost like, man, he's the savior. He's going to be the sole reason we win a national championship. And I'm like, wait, hold up. We really need to discuss this because I don't have a problem with Sam Hartman coming to Notre Dame. I understand what he brings to the table. But let's not forget, this is Notre Dame. He needs us just as much as we need him. And we need to understand there are going to be certain games. Every game at Wake Forest, he had to play good
to
win a game. There was no other way to win.
Well, you saw the article when he transferred, Sean. The games of 55, 53, 45, 42, 38
Absolutely.
points where they lost.
Absolutely. So I think that is where people, I guess they got upset with some of the things that I said, which I've never said anything negative about Sam Hartman. I never said he wasn't a good quarterback. I never said he wasn't an upgrade to the quarterback position, right? I did say just because he's coming in, I fully expect Tyler Buchner to say, this is my spot.
Sure.
Come get it. I don't think Tyler Buchner is going to run from a competition.
No.
And, some people might differ. If he does lose the competition, I expect Tyler Buchner to stick around and be on the roster next year.
Agree.
Those are my expectations.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, life is about to get a whole lot easier at the quarterback position for Sam Hartman because he's coming to Notre Dame.
Right.
For a lot of different
reasons. Which is why he's coming to Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
And so, to me, Sean, how I take your comment is basically it's number one, there is no magic pill. There is no get one guy and you're good. If you put Joe Burrow to LSU and he's not thrown to Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's not winning the championship, right?
Yeah.
If he doesn't have the changes that Joe Brady brought into the system, they don't win a championship. And if they don't have a Dave Aranda running that defense to make stops for a team that scores at will, and then you see what happens with Oklahoma and LSU. That offense is never good enough to win a championship because the defense can't make enough stops. Dave Aranda's defense obviously was good enough to do that.
Right.
There's all these different pieces to go into it. So what you're not saying, however, is that Sam Hartman doesn't move the needle. Because at least I don't think that you are. Because I clearly think he does, and I've heard you and I have talked about this in private. That's why I was so surprised by some of the takes to what you had said. And in this instance, I did not get a chance to listen to that specific episode. You and I talked about it because I saw some of the responses to it. But it's one of those things where, look, we've been adamant about this for years, Sean and I. Notre Dame needs a big-time quarterback to have a chance to play for championship.
Absolutely.
Do I think Sam Hartman is on the same level as Caleb Williams and guys like that? No, I don't. But I don't think Notre Dame needs that kind of quarterback. There's no question that the one thing holding Notre Dame back in many years has been quarterback play.
Absolutely.
But the point is that Sam Hartman doesn't walk into a situation with a roster that's just okay, and then he puts it on his shoulders and says, "Let's go win a championship." That's not what's happening here. You have a roster that Sam Hartman and a couple other pieces away from really being a championship caliber team, and that's what has people excited about it. Is that right there? Because look, the reality is, Sean, and you kind of hit on both points of this, in my opinion, is landing Sam Hartman makes Notre Dame and greatly increases Notre Dame's chances of having an elite quarterback play next year.
Yeah.
And that's not just and that has nothing to do with that. That's not only about Sam Hartman. It's if Sam Hartman's starting quarterback, he's going to have to beat out Tyler Buchner. That's not going to be easy. And if he does beat out Tyler Buchner, and he is as good as we think he can be, and the Notre Dame system and the talent around him is able to do for him what we think it will do for him, because he's going to elevate the talent around him, and the talent around him is going to elevate him. That's truly, to me, the makings of a great offense. Is Joe Burrow needed those other players around him, but also Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson needed Joe Burrow. And that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so when I look at it, I say, this isn't a situation where Sam Hartman just comes in and puts the entire program on his shoulders. Sam Hartman elevates the program because he fits a very important role that has really been lacking for the most part for years, if we're going to be completely honest about it. And so that's what has people so excited. But part of the reason Sam Hartman picked Notre Dame is because of the fact that the town around him is going to be so much better. But the other part of it too, Sean, is it's not just if Sam Hartman's a starter. If Tyler Buchner beats out Sam Hartman, then again, same thing. So your margin for error, which we talk about a lot on this show, is so much greater by getting Sam Hartman because it's going to push Tyler Buchner to be his best. And maybe it's not good enough for him to be the starter in 2023, but it's going to make him better, which then puts him in position to A, step in if his number's called in 2023, or B, if he does stay and takes over in 24 and 25, he's going to be such a better player by being pushed. He's never been pushed by anyone. In my opinion.
Not really. Most people will tell you that the competition with Drew Pine pushed him, but
it didn't.
It didn't.
I mean, it didn't. I mean, Tyler was clearly the better player there. And I mean, every source I have at Notre Dame said the same thing, whether it was Notre Dame sources, people that were in practices that I knew that were at some of the practices that weren't open to the media would say the same thing. It's really not close. Talking to parents, talking to players, talking to other people around the program, it was never close. And, so Tyler earned the starting job. I don't want to disrespect him by saying that, but like Tyler was never pushed. I mean, like Jack Cohn it wasn't a push there because Tyler was a freshman. The expectations weren't there for him to come in. I know fan expectations were that he was going to come in and play start as a freshman, but that was never Notre Dame's expectation, which is why they went and got Jack Cohn in the first place.
Right.
And so, I think it's going to make Tyler a better player. And whether that means his time comes in 24 or 25, it remains to be seen. But the thing about it is in 2023, the margin for error has been greatly widened. And if, God forbid, there's another quarterback injury next year, you're now walking a situation where instead of having Drew Pine coming off the bench, you've got a Tyler Buchner coming off the bench. And then worst case scenario, a second-year Steve Angeli or a Kenny Minchey. The quarterback room got tremendously better because there's two big additions to the quarterback room this spring. And it's not you lose Drew Pine, but you're adding Sam Hartman and Kenny Minchey this spring. So the talent in the quarterback room got way better. And now it's just about, okay, can they get all the pieces around him? Do they have all the pieces around him for this offense to be a championship caliber offense? And I think that's the question here, Sean. And I know that's also leads into some other aspects of this that you want to discuss.
Well, we can progress through this. The next spot I want to get to, let me call an audible right quick. Because you said something that was key right there. And you talk about transitioning and bringing him in. He elevates the quarterback room. And this is something I told you. And this is something that made me upset about the response from Notre Dame fans, especially the fans that were like, yeah, we're winning a national championship. You're being unfair to Sam Hartman. Don't do that. That's the same thing you did to Drew Pine.
Sean, when you say that, do you mean
when Drew Pine had a bad game, then you wanted to protect him.
Yeah.
Instead of just looking at it for what it was and just giving him the chance to grow and play football. Like Sam Hartman is making a true transition. Sure. He's going from a mesh system to a pro system. Right. Now, that might not be a tremendous jump.
In my opinion, it won't be as big of a jump as Jack Cohn made.
Right.
Now, who was an under center, play action. Yeah.
This is something I had to go to guys that played for Notre Dame to ask them if I was tripping.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sam Hartman's biggest game every year was Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Notre Dame plays 3 to 4 Clemson games.
Right. Well, this next year, especially, Sean.
Every year.
I mean, this next year, Clemson could be their third best opponent.
Absolutely. And someone else could jump up in the ACC.
Sure.
And rival Clemson.
Duke, NC State, Louisville, all teams that Notre Dame plays next year.
So what we're really talking about here, this is why it's unfair. And Sam Hartman has never experienced walking out in Notre Dame Stadium under the lights against Ohio State. He's never experienced that. He's never experienced weeks later Caleb Williams coming in under the lights in that rivalry, what that means. This is a whole new level. This is Notre Dame. And it's not just the big games.
Right.
Malik pointed this out to me. He said, Sean, it's not even the big games. He said it's the fact that everybody on the schedule seems to play their best against Notre Dame.
Sure.
He said they're going to get everyone's best. He said he hasn't experienced that. He said, so it's going to be something different that he's going to have to get used to. He said, but the blessing is the 5 guys in front of him, that running back room behind him, the coaching staff, and everything that he's walking into is going to make it a little bit easier to transition and not to have pressure to be the guy. Mm-hmm. He's going to be one of the guys. He doesn't have to be the guy. All he has to do is be Sam Hartman, the quarterback. Be the same quarterback you were at Wake Forest. If you can do that, we're not asking you to come in and be Bryce Young. We're not asking you to come back in and be a top 5 NFL draft pick and put everybody on your shoulders and carry us. That's not what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to come in and be a part of what we're already building to. And if you play to the level that we expect you to play to, we're going to be right there knocking on the door of the college football playoff. Because we have that expectation as a staff in the middle of the season. I think they realized at some point during the middle of the season, once they got things corrected, they realized what they didn't have. They realized what they did have.
There's a lot of self-awareness.
Absolutely.
About what the team was lacking.
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways.
This is another year. This is another thing. And then I'll let you ride out. And we talked about this. The reason they feel that way is because the landscape of college football is about to be totally different in 23. It's going to be a very obscure year when it comes to the quarterback situation. Because most of your big-time programs will have first-time starters, except for USC. USC is the only big...
In Michigan.
In Michigan. You're right. Alabama, Georgia. Everybody's going to have a new starter. A new quarterback that they're trying to work in. I think Georgia's probably waiting around for Spencer Sanders after this championship game. That's the rumor down there. That more than likely that's where he lands.
And if it's not him, it's going to be some other highly ranked kid. Brock Vandagriff, Carson Beck, something like that.
The landscape so most of the veteran quarterbacks are going to be, at Duke, at other teams.
Yeah.
You might see some of those teams get a little bit more confident after watching TCU. Face off.
Well, Notre Dame should be getting more confident about that after watching TCU.
Absolutely.
I mean, to me, Tyler Buchner's a better version of Max Duggan. I mean, that's what I see Tyler Buchner as. Better playmaker, better thrower when he's on. Yeah. I mean, he's a better version of Max Duggan, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And, look, now the question, however, is why is Max Duggan in the – see, here, to me, the title game is a perfect example of what you're talking about, Sean. Mm-hmm. Because think of all the big-time quarterbacks in college football this year, and there were some dudes in college football this year.
Yeah.
Right? There was Caleb Williams who won the Heisman. There's C.J. Stroud. There's Bryce Young. There's some big-time quarterbacks. What are they all doing tonight? They're all watching the game on their TV just like we are, right? Why? Because the pieces around them, coaching-wise and player-wise, weren't always what they needed to be. Stetson Bennett and Max Duggan, neither of them will be, to me, unless some NFL team is just dumb, neither of them will be day 1 or day 2 picks, in my opinion. They're both rounds 5 to 7 guys at best, in my opinion.
I guarantee this, though. They will have the best job in all of pro football, which is the backup quarterback.
Correct. But my point is but they were guys that came in and did, like Stetson Bennett has really developed as a player. People put too much hype on him, and but the fact is he does what he needs to do. But the reason he's got a chance to be a 2-time champion, and Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud and Caleb Williams have combined for 0, is because of what's around him. Great coaching, great team around him. And that's the point that Sean's making is, look, don't put the pressure on they're a championship team because of Sam Hartman, because if they don't win, then it will be blamed on Sam Hartman. Yeah. That's the reality of it. When in reality, it may be because they're not good enough at some other places.
Yeah.
I think the excitement, however, from fans, and I get this, is because the quarterback play has been so mediocre for years that we had to listen to people hype up Ian Book as some sort of like great player, right? And he was just a nice, steady game manager type of kid and good kid and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
but not a guy you're winning a championship with.
No.
Can Sam Hartman be that kind of guy? Absolutely. When I watch the championship game tonight, I'm going to be thinking, why can't Notre Dame, at the quarterback position be on this level? And that's the key. Because Sean, you had made a comment to me like, if he plays the way that he needs to play at Notre Dame and the way I think he's capable of, and so what does that look like, right? So when I look at Sam Hartman and the transition he's making, the difference between him and Jack Cohn, Jack had to learn completely new footwork, going from being a predominantly under center guy with a fullback and play action pass and all that to a spread guy. And I thought by middle of the year, Tommy Rees had him ready to play. I mean, Jack Cohn in the last 5-6 games of the season.
We were searching, trying to find an extra year eligibility for Jack Cohn.
Seriously. Right. And I've said this before. If Jack Cohn's Notre Dame starting quarterback this year, I'm not sure. Maybe one team beats him. Maybe one team beats him. But his last. His last 71.4% completion, 66.7, 79.3, 75, 70.3. Then he was only 55.9 in the bowl game against Oklahoma State, but he passed for 509 yards and 5 touchdowns. Right? Yeah. It got to the point where we're thinking about, man, if Jack Cohn would have come back this year, what could have been? Think about that statement, though. He was an undrafted free agent. But that's how thirsty Notre Dame fans are for a quarterback that can play. And you know me, I'm a big proponent of Jack Cohn and what he brought to the table. But Sam Hartman, to me, is making less of a transition in a lot of different ways mechanically. All he needs to do is eliminate stuff, not add stuff. He has dropped back under center from shotgun. He's going to eliminate that mesh stuff that's when a lot of his mistakes would happen. Is he'd get into that mesh stuff and he's throwing because the slow mesh takes him towards the line of scrimmage and then the offensive line is coming back. There's times he's kind of like jumping up and throwing as the guys are hitting him in the face. Balls are getting tipped. Yeah. It's harder for him to see reads. So you got to see him kind of step back and drop and go through the progressions in that kind of way, Sean. And so those are the different aspects that you look at and say, he's not making the same kind of changes that we saw from Sam Hartman. From Jack Cohn. Yeah. So I think that transition will be good. Now the change for him is going to be from a reading and a processing thing. So that's where Jack Cohn didn't have to make a huge adjustment. Is Jack came from a pro style passing system to a pro style passing system. Right. It was different, but he was making deeper, more complex reads at Wisconsin. Sam hasn't done as much of that at Wake Forest. So that the adjustment for him is going to be more mental than physical, which for me, if he's got the mental acumen, will actually be good because you can make that in the spring and the summer. Right. And so that's a positive. What can be different is when you've got to reprogram your body to do something it's not used to doing. That's where you can that's where you can have a challenge. Like Joe Burrow needed a transition year to kind of get comfortable, when he transferred. But some guys don't because they go to systems that are better suited to kind of what they do. Like Justin Fields had more of a transition into Georgia than he had into Ohio State because into Georgia he had to learn to be more under center and do all that kind of stuff. And whereas going to Ohio State, he was going back to kind of stuff he did in high school. And so that's what I look at. But, to me, it's one of those things where, what does it look like for Sam Hartman to run this offense effectively? Well, he was never really a high completion percentage guy. Part of that is because he threw more balls 10 yards past the line than anybody in college football the last 2 years. This year, no one threw more passes down the field from either 10 plus or 20 plus the last 2 years than Sam Hartman. Now, this year, Drake May threw more individually this year by like 3. He had 117. Sam Hartman had 110. He was third this year in yards in attempts past 20 yards. This cat's throwing the ball downfield a lot. Well, the further down the field you go, the lower your completion percentage is going to be. Right. And then when you're talking about playing behind the offensive line he played in all 5 of his years at Wake Forest averaged 92nd or worse in sacks allowed. And part of that is the offensive line hasn't been very good most years. And the other part of it is the system inherently puts the quarterback in more sack opportunities and getting hit in the face opportunities. Yeah. Because of the way that the mesh is run. So, and that was part of the reason I didn't want him at first, Sean, to be completely honest with you. That's the reason I was like, I mean, you know this, when you and I first started talking about Sam Hartman being an option for Notre Dame, I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about this, man, just from having watched them on TV.
Right.
Well, then you dive into the film a little bit more, and you start to find those snaps where he was more of a drop back quarterback. Like, oh, when he was doing that, this cat was money. And so you look and say, this is a guy that can complete 65 to 68% of his passes in this style of offense. This is a guy that can also still attack the ball down the field. He's not going to throw the ball deep as much as he did at Wake Forest.
Yeah.
Won't have to. But it'll be in more one-on-one opportunities because he's going to have a lot more defenders near the box than he did at Wake Forest.
Yeah.
So he's going to have a lot more one-on-one reads on the outside, a lot more ISO reads than he had at Wake Forest, where he had to kind of read through the whole defense. That should help him a bunch. And then you would hope that it's going to cut down on his interceptions some, but I'm honestly not going to obsess too much over the interceptions because, number one, as you kind of go through and you look at the 26 picks he had last year, I'd say about 4 or 5 of them were off of kind of deflected balls. Some of the others a couple others were just trying to take some chances in situations where they were trailing. And then there's times he'll just flat miss a read and just not see a guy like
Brian. That's called being the guy that has to make. It's the same thing. Remember that year Deshaun had, where he threw 20 interceptions, but he was throwing the ball like 70 times a game,
right?
Because he was the only thing that Clemson had offensively because they didn't have a running game.
Well, they didn't try to build one, which I thought they should have ran better with Wayne Gallman there, but they just kind of decided they were going to go in that direction, and that was kind of when I thought the Clemson offense started to kind of go like this. They put so much on the quarterback's shoulders, and the scheme wasn't good. I've never been a big fan of Clemson's offensive scheme. You know that. They just win because they had better players than everybody else, or at least better quarterback than everybody. But see, you've got to be careful not to beat too much of that out of him, because it's kind of like with Tyler Buchner. Am I okay with Tyler Buchner throwing 3 picks? No, I'm not. Do I want to completely eliminate the things that led to those 3 picks? No, I don't. Because if you eliminate that, then you also eliminate the crazy throw to Jaden Thomas. You eliminate the bomb they threw to Braden Lindsey. I don't want to eliminate that. I just want to get him a little bit smarter with it. So you're going to have to live with the fact that there's going to be a couple picks next year that he's going to throw that you're like, yeah, Drew Pine never would have made that pick. You're correct. But there's about 12 throws that Sam Hartman's going to make every game that like Drew Pine never would even attempt, much less complete.
No,
that's the trade-off.
That's facts
that you need to look into, and that's what's going to make this team so much better, in my opinion, is because of that. Whether it's Sam Hartman or Tyler Buchner quarterback, but of course, look, Notre Dame's not bringing Sam Hartman in with the thought that he's going to get beat out in 2 weeks, and Sam Hartman's not coming here with the thought he's going to get beat out.
No.
Can Tyler Buchner beat him out? Of course he can, but it's not what I'm expecting. So we're going to kind of go with the premise that if Sam Hartman wins the job, and so. Then you get into, Sean, okay, well, are the pieces around him good enough? Because here's what I don't think Sam Hartman's going to be able to do. I don't think Sam Hartman's going to be able to put this team completely on his shoulders and go win a championship. And honestly,
can you say that one more time?
I don't think Sam Hartman's going to be able to put this team on his shoulders and go win a championship the way that like Trevor Lawrence did. Deshaun Watson did in 2016. The way that in some ways Mac Jones did in 2020, in some ways.
I just wanted it to come out of your mouth.
Because, but what you have to understand is, does that mean Sam Hartman can't win a title? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is he is more Max Duggan, Stetson Bennett than he is Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. Mm-hmm. But who's playing for a title in Caleb Williams? But who's playing for a title tonight? It's not Bryce Young. No. It's not CJ Stroud. It's not Caleb Williams. It's not Drake May. It's not Hendon Hooker. Who is it? It's Max Duggan and Stetson Bennett. And that's my point, is that Notre Dame is not in a position yet where they have a quarterback that can just say, hey, now maybe they have one. Maybe that guy's Tyler Buchner. Because the interesting thing is, Sean, is I do think Tyler Buchner can be that kind of guy. I just don't think it's going to be 2023 yet. I do think Tyler Buchner is the kind of talent that can put a team on his shoulders and say, I got this. Mm-hmm. But he's not there yet. I think Kenny Minchey could maybe be that guy. I think CJ Carr can be that guy. But they're not going to be the quarterbacks in 2023. So the key is Sam Hartman that missing piece to a championship puzzle? That's the key. That's what I think he can be, but they're not quite there yet. There's a couple little things they need to add, and some of them they've already added, Sean. Yeah. We'll get to it when we get to the transfer stuff, but there's some other pieces that need to add and some key pieces they have added from high school recruiting and then also from the transfer portal that's going to be there. Because if you take Sam Hartman and put him on the Notre Dame 2022 team, Notre Dame is, to me, at worst 10-2, maybe even 11-1. Like, I don't know if this team was.
They don't lose. They don't lose to Marshall and Stanford.
No, and
they don't lose to Marshall and Stanford.
And I think they would have won either Ohio State or USC. I think they would have won one of those games, in my opinion. At best, I think they could have. Like, to me, USC definitely USC, because Sam Hartman, I don't think, makes those turnovers that Drew Pine made.
I would say this later in the season. Yes, the USC game would have been a better bet than game one.
If I was projecting, I think they would have still lost the opener because the O-line wasn't playing well. They'd had trouble giving him time. But to me, when I look at, I'll take this to my grave, Sean. 17-7. Notre Dame goes down there and scores to make it 17-14. Third quarter,
the second half.
USC, they roll USC.
Yeah.
USC wouldn't know how to handle that. Look at that happen against Utah.
Yeah.
Once Utah smacked them in the mouth a little bit and got on them, USC collapsed.
Once Tulane smacked them in the mouth.
Right. All right. I mean, Caleb Williams had to be Superman that game, and they still were Drew Pine making a couple really bad mistakes away from being in that game and having a shot to win it. So, but the point is, but I don't know if they're playing tonight. You may disagree with that, Sean, but I don't know if they're playing tonight if Sam Hartman's the quarterback. And that's the thing.
I don't think so. I would say I don't think.
I think they'd have been in, but I don't know if they're playing tonight.
I don't know if they're playing tonight. They definitely would have been in the conversation.
Right. Because are they quite ready? Are they quite there yet with this team to have beaten Georgia?
Yeah, because if they lose to Ohio State, that's an impressive loss.
Right.
To the committee.
I actually think they would have been in over Ohio State if they were 11-1. It would have been very debated, but
if Ohio State had lost the way they lost against Michigan.
Correct.
Yes.
11-1 Notre Dame with a let's say 21. Let's say he was worth 3 points.
Yeah.
A 21-13 loss to Ohio State at Ohio State, and then roll Clemson, beat USC, roll North Carolina, all that. I think Notre Dame would have been in over Ohio State because the resume would have been way better.
Yeah.
Way better.
Yeah.
But the point is Sam Hartman makes his team better. Sam Hartman gets them to the point where quarterback won't be the reason they don't play for a title next year.
No.
That's what Sam Hartman does.
No.
In my opinion.
Thomas Harper makes this team better. We were just talking about that.
Right.
So
and we'll get to that in a second too.
Right.
But like just wrapping up the quarterback position, Sean, is and we have to be willing to address this is like, look, we have to be willing to say that Sam Hartman makes his team better.
Heck yeah.
No question, like way better than what the quarterback play was. But I don't think that it's fair to ask him or any other transfer portal. I think he's probably the best player that jumped into the portal quarterback, in my opinion. I think he's better than Spencer Sanders. He may not be more physically gifted than Spencer Sanders, but he's a better quarterback than Spencer Sanders. He's better than Graham Mertz. He's better than much better than Grayson McCall. I'm trying to think of some of the other quarterbacks. He's obviously way better than Jack Plummer. Hudson Card. I mean, Hudson Card may have more physical tools, but he's not going to be the better quarterback in 2023 for the same reason that Tyler Buchner may not be the better quarterback in 2023. And I don't think Hudson Card has physical tools as good as Tyler Buchner's, in my opinion. So, to me, he makes them better, and he helps reduce the odds that quarterback's the reason they don't play for a title next year.
Yeah.
But the reality is we also have to be willing to look at this roster, Sean, and I know this is kind of part of what you wanted to talk about and say, but there's still other parts of the roster that have to get better if they're going to, coaching-wise and player-wise, we're going to play for a title. Yeah. Now, some of that is addressing portal needs. Some of it is coach up the kids you have and get them ready to play, like Georgia did. Georgia lost 15 dudes in the NFL last year. You know what they went and did? They didn't get a bunch of transfer dudes. How many guys in their starting lineup are transfers, Sean?
0. They lost their best pass rusher and their team captain.
Correct.
To injury as well.
Right. And they lost their number 2 tight end, got banged up, in the postseason a little bit. You know, you had other injuries during Ladd McConkey was not 100% against Ohio State. Ladd McConkey, they built their receiving core around Ladd McConkey, right? So, I mean, but the point is they were strong enough in so many other positions that they didn't go out there and like Bama went out and just bought a bunch of players. I don't mean that way. Like, you know what I'm saying, right? With the portal stuff. They went out and got Jahmyr Gibbs and the guy from Georgia, Jermaine Burton, you know, and they went out and got Tyler Harrell, and they went out and got all these, you know, who's the kid they got from the cornerback that everybody thought was this great player, right? They went out and got all these portal guys. Yes, they got the left tackle, you know, Tyler Stern, and they got all these transfer guys. And what happened to Bama? They're a worse team this year than they were last year. You know, and you know, it was it saved USC. What's USC doing tonight? What are they doing?
Sitting at home.
Right. I mean, yeah, they beat Notre Dame, but they also got their butts kicked by Tulane, and by Utah, and lost to flipping Tulane in the Cotton Bowl. So, you know, I still believe that building your team through high school is the way to go, and then you plug in certain pieces there. So to me, you know, it's about, okay, Chancey Stuckey, big responsibility for you this year. Yeah, you got Caleb Smith. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but if this team wants to be a championship team, you got to figure out how to get Tobias Merriweather and Deion Colsey going. You got to figure out a way to get Lorenzo Styles' head back on straight. You got to be able to get these freshmen ready to play. And then it's up to Tommy Rees to say, okay, Coach Rees, how can you better utilize Jaden Thomas? I loved how Tommy Rees used Jaden Thomas in the bowl game. And if they use him like that next year, Sean, he's going to have a really, really clutch money year.
Absolutely.
As a slot guy.
Absolutely.
And some other of the outside guys may get more of the love and the attention, but he's going to be so clutch and so money, just like he was in that bowl game where he didn't catch a ton of balls in that game, but they were all big. They were all important. You know, you're going to be okay at tight end. You know, your offensive line, Harry Houston's going to do what he does. Dylan McCullough's going to do what he does. Jared Parker's going to do what he does. They're going to be fine there. But Chancey Stuckey, you better step it up, right? Other side of the ball. Al Washington, you better get some of these boys ready to go, because I don't want to hear excuses about, they don't have enough talent on the defensive line. If they don't add another transfer portal guy, I don't want to hear any crying about how they don't have good enough players on the defensive line.
Nope.
Riley Mills was a top recruit. Jordan Patelho was a top recruit. Josh Burnham was a top recruit. Gabriel Rubio was a top recruit. Right? Nana Osafo-Mensah was a top recruit, right? You know, you're bringing in 4 pretty talented defensive linemen. And I know Aiden Gobeyer was a top recruit. Tyson Ford, as you said, was a top 100 player. There's a lot of coaches in college football that would be begging. And Jason Onye wasn't a top recruit, but he was a very, very skilled player. Aiden Kana-Ana, you get him back from injury, right? There's no excuse for you not to have a good defensive line next year, even if you don't get a portal guy. But can you coach it up well enough? And then Al Golden, can you coach it up well enough? So I think there's some questions there. And then up to the players. Okay, Jordan Patelho, are you going to have your head on straight enough to do what you need to do to become a breakout player next year? Hope so. Josh Burnham, you're going to be locked in to do what you need to do, right? Gabriel Rubio, you're going to do what you need to do. Riley Mills, you're going to kind of say, hey, this is my D-line now, and do what you got to do in this offseason. Those are all questions that have to be asked on the player level. Linebacker-wise, you guys going to finally let some of the more talented players play? Because, you're going to need that. Are you going to figure out a way to either get Maris Leufau going or find someone else to play his role? There's a lot of questions like that. But look, Notre Dame quarterback, Notre Dame, in my opinion, is now good enough to compete for a championship.
Absolutely.
Offensive line, running back-wise, right now, Notre Dame, in my opinion, is good enough to compete for a championship. Cornerback next year, Notre Dame is going to be good enough to compete for a championship. There's no question.
No question.
Now, receiver, there's the talent's there. The talent is there. Don't tell me a team's about to play for a championship with Ladd McConkey as your top receiver is somehow has the talent to be great and win a championship, but Notre Dame doesn't. Don't give me that. Okay. With all the top 100 recruits, Notre Dame's going to have a receiver on their roster. Okay. And then, safety. The guys that played in the bowl game are basically all back with the exception of Houston Griffith. So that to me, it was solid last year. Linebacker, D-line, receiver are the positions that have to step up. And it's not going to be a talent problem, Sean. It's not going to be a talent problem.
No.
Now, can you get some portal guys that maybe provide you some depth and some veteran play? Cool. I'm good with that. Because like some people say, well, don't go to the portal and get another Viper. Because number one, I'm good with where they're at a Viper. But if they go get another guy, okay, you doing what you talk about a quarterback. You're enhancing your the potential that somebody breaks out as a dude next year.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm looking at. But Sam Hartman now scratches quarterback off the list, in my opinion.
And because he does that, the next thing is what you pointed out. I think you talked about it with Vince last week. 38 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
That should be the floor. That should be the floor.
Yeah.
And you talk about no excuses. I'm sorry. There are no more excuses for this offensive coordinator at Notre Dame.
Right.
That's it. Notre Dame and its offense should efficiently get to 38 points per game and even maybe up over 40 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we
Yep.
understand if Sam Hartman comes in, it's a learning curve.
Sure.
But with that learning curve, he has an offensive line and a running game to lean on, especially early in the season. I expect there to be games where Sam Hartman might not throw, but for 200 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they're not in the groove. The running game is dominating so much.
He plays 2 quarters, basically.
There's no need to really throw the ball.
Right.
You expect a couple of those.
He's not going to know what to do in that situation.
No, he's not. He's not. He's not. He's going to be like a kid in the candy shop.
Here's something else that should help Sam Hartman too, Sean, and Tyler Buckner, both of them, because I think they'll both play. If they don't both play in the first 3 games a bunch, I'm going to be upset. Not because I expect them to rotate, but you start the season off with Navy, Tennessee State, and Central Michigan. Right? I'm sorry, Coach Freeman. I know you're a respectful guy, but you need to come out and just boat race those 3 teams. And really get your confidence up, because some of the mistakes that Sam may make early in the season won't be as costly in those games, in my opinion. And so that's something that I want to see too. And that should help you maybe get Tyler some early playing time as well. Make sure he's sharp and crisp. And then take some of that beating. So, like, if you can get through the first few games, Sam Hartman's pretty clean, from a sack standpoint, which is what you should be if the offensive line is as good as we think it's going to be. All of a sudden his confidence raises, and now he's ready to go face an Ohio State and ready to really face that tough part of the schedule. So that's something that the last 2 – Jack Cohn had to jump right in it at Florida State. Right in it. And then, this past year, obviously starting off, Tyler Buckner's first career start at Notre Dame is at Ohio State. Like, seriously? Like, this is Jack Cohn's first career starts at Florida State, and that environment. And that, whereas who is Sam Hartman's? It's playing Navy.
Yeah.
And then you get to come home after playing in Ireland and play Tennessee State.
Yeah.
Then you get to come home and you're playing Central Michigan, went 4-8 last year. That should help.
This is why I constantly encourage the fan base to understand who your football program is. Like, we're not middle of the pack.
Right.
We're top 5, top 6 in the nation annually. We put top 5, top 6 people in the NFL.
Right.
Annually, we have the 5th or 6th most people in the NFL. We just had a full week of our tight ends just running up the board with touchdowns 2 weeks ago in the NFL. Like, when was the last time you even heard the name Brock Wright? He's catching multiple touchdowns in a game. Brock Wright, was he ever the number 1?
No, he was Brock Wright at Notre Dame?
Yeah.
He was never number 2.
He was number 2.
Right.
And this is what he's doing. We just had Josh Pate put out a video where he was talking about, the reason people want to go play offensive line at Alabama is because they put all of these guys in the first round. And my pushback was, but Iowa and Notre Dame produce better products in the NFL.
And put plenty of guys in the first round as well.
Absolutely.
During Harry Hiestan's tenure at Notre Dame, nobody had more first-round picks than Harry Hiestand. No, nobody. Not Alabama.
Yeah.
Not Iowa. Not Wisconsin. But that was 5 years ago, Sean, and that's way too long ago for people to be remembering.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
And it goes back to what you said. I think the fan reaction was because they have been starved at that position. But like I know, because we do this a lot to ourselves, especially when we do multiple shows in a day, we'll both get done and it's like 4 or 5 o'clock and we haven't eaten anything all day.
Right.
And we're so hungry. And literally whatever we eat is going to taste really good. It's like, oh my God, this is so good. Yeah, because you're starved. And I think that was kind of like the reaction, like, oh, wait a minute, we're going over the top a little bit because we're so starved. It's good, but let's not act like it's that good or go to that extent.
Right.
And in that extent, let's not be dismissive
right.
of Tyler Buckner. That I definitely don't like that. I'm not going so over the top that I'm not dismissing how this young man came back, showed resolve, and
Right.
improved. He improved without playing a down of football from Marshall to that bowl game. He
Yeah.
improved.
Yeah.
So his improvement, even if he's not the starter, raises the level of the backup. So if something happens to Sam Hartman in 23 as a starter, you feel pretty confident with that dude coming
Mm-hmm.
in and saying, "Oh yeah, we can win this week.
Mm-hmm.
We can win this week with him." So
Right.
absolutely, as in totality, all of the pieces are starting to come together for Marcus Freeman's plan to get Notre Dame to the national
Right.
championship, and
Right.
that's what we should be excited about the most.
Right. And I think what I'm excited about too, Sean, is one of the things I've talked about is being at games, and I've
Mm-hmm.
talked about this with Ryan at the couple games he went to, because Ryan was at a game he was at the Marshall game, then he covered Syracuse, and then he covered the Navy games for Irish Breakdown. So he was at 3 games this year live, and I was at almost all the games this year as well. You see, like, there's somebody in the chat saying, do we have receivers can get open consistently? And I'm like, look, y'all, that was not the problem this year. I keep saying this. That was not the problem this year. It's not a surprise when Tyler Buckner came back and kind of played like we expect Tyler Buckner to play as a passer, and yeah, the mistakes were there, but meaning like getting the ball out, attacking, doing all that. All of a sudden, receivers are getting open all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that, right? And there was a couple other times he missed open receivers. He missed Mitchell Evans going down on the seam
They
route.
missed Jay Thomas on a out
Yeah,
route. That was
yeah. I
wide
had
open.
Chris Tyree open on a little quick wheel route. I mean, there was times when he had. You're talking about that first third down, right?
Yeah,
He had that deep. There was like that.
Great route.
Kind of
Great
looked like
route.
a scissors concept, and
Yeah.
Jaden broke it off on an out cut, because that's what you do against that particular coverage, is you break it out, and Tyler just threw it too wide. I mean, he had guys getting open all day, and we've been saying that all year. I mean, Drew Pine finally steps up and starts hitting guys down the field, and all of a sudden, look what happens. They rip USC up with an okay player quarterback, right? Ohio State game. Go back and watch that game. There's about 4 or 5 guys that were open for what should have been big plays against Ohio State. But Tyler either missed, the receiver slowed down, Lorenzo Styles, or he didn't get time to throw.
Yeah.
That's the talent at receiver is not the problem. The attitude at times is a problem. The technique early in the season was a problem. But one of the guys that I was most critical of early in the season, Jaden Thomas, for his effort and route running, by the end of the year was, in my opinion, their best receiver by the end of the year.
Facts.
So that growth gave me confidence that, hey, you got a receivers coach and get these guys ready. Deion Colsey was non-existent early in the year. Mm-hmm. By the end of the regular season, he's their most clutch pass catcher, not named Michael Mayer.
Mm-hmm.
And you did all that without Michael Mayer in the bowl game as well, which is another thing. So you look at us on and say, man, look, man, the talent's there for this team. Don't tell me that TCU's got the talent to go play for a championship, but Notre Dame doesn't. It's about coach them up, right? Now, if you can add some transfer portal pieces, go for it. And I think they've already added 2 at positions where they needed it, and as we'll get into here in a minute. But the rest of it is like, look, go coach up. I don't care about CJ Williams. Whatever. What did he do at USC this year? I'm not worried about him. Go coach up Tobias. Go coach up Deion. Go coach up Lorenzo Styles. Get Lorenzo back to being the dude head-wise and body-wise, the guy he was in the bowl game in late 2021. Mm-hmm. You get him back to just being that guy. Forget improving upon that guy. Just get him back to being that guy.
Yeah.
With Jaden Thomas, with the tight ends, with Caleb Smith, with Deion Colsey, with Tobias Merriweather.
Yeah.
This receiving corps has a chance to be really good, but they got to prove it. That's the thing. And that's why I'm not ready to just jump in that Notre Dame should be a preseason top 5 team. I'm not ready to go there yet. Do I think they have a top 5 roster, just pure talent-wise? Yeah, I think they're in that conversation. There's no doubt. But there's a lot of unproven aspects to that top 5 roster. There's a lot of defensive linemen that need to prove themselves this year. A lot of linebackers that got to get better and prove themselves this year. There's a lot of receivers that got to show me that they can take their – because right now, with the D-line, the receiving core, and the linebacker core, Sean, the primary topic of conversation is the potential. You don't win championships with potential. You win championships with production.
Mm-hmm.
And how quickly they get the potential, or not even quickly, if they can at all, get the potential to turn into production is going to determine whether they win a championship. And it's not going to be because – they don't win it because Sam Hartman's not that guy. Sam Hartman won't be that guy because the receivers don't step up and do what they need to do. The offensive line doesn't continue making strides. The defense makes him have to be in shootouts next year every time they play a big game. Like, that's the concern I have right now is, you're going to get into a shootout with USC next year, and then it's Sam Hartman versus Caleb Williams. You don't want it to be that way. You want it to be Notre Dame and Sam Hartman against Caleb Williams. That's where you want it to be.
Absolutely.
And so that's how you beat Caleb Williams. You don't want, it's got to be Sam Hartman and Notre Dame against Clemson. It's got to be Sam Hartman and Notre Dame against Ohio State, not Sam Hartman against Ohio State. That's the difference between what he has at Notre Dame and what he has at Wake Forest. But if it comes down to it where it's Kyle McCord's team is playing great and Sam Hartman's got to put the team on his shoulders, Ohio State's going to win that football game because Kyle McCord's his supporting cast will be better if they don't play if it's that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's same thing against USC. If it's got to be Caleb Williams putting his team on his shoulders and Sam Hartman putting his team on his shoulders, it's probably not going to end the way that we want it to end, right? Just because he's a really, really good college quarterback, but those guys are elite physical specimens at quarterback. And so to me, Notre Dame needs to say, hey, Sam, you come do your thing. We're going to do our thing. And together we can be amazing. And that's like, you take USC, for example, Sean, I'm curious if you agree or disagree with me on this. If you take Caleb Williams off of USC's roster and give them any quarterback in the country not named Drake May, Bryce Young, or CJ Stroud, they're a barely 500 football team this year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Mediocre offensive line, in my view, with all due respect.
Yeah.
Below average defense that just gets torched by every good. I mean, they made Drew Pine look like Jimmy Clausen. I mean, you know what I mean? And I'm not taking a shot at Drew, but like, he didn't look like that all year.
They made the Pratt kid look better.
Right. So that's not where Notre Dame is.
Yeah.
That's not where Notre Dame is. Notre Dame's a good football team without you. Now, your job is to take that next step offensively, and I think that's the big question, Sean, because you'd mentioned, can they be that 38 to 42 point per game team? That's the question. I think Sam Hartman gives them a chance to do that.
Yeah.
But they need the other positions to step up as well. The good news is you've got the depth. This is why depth is so important. If Lorenzo Styles doesn't pan out, and Tobias Merriweather or Deion Colsey don't pan out next year, guess what? You still have Jaden Thomas. You still have Caleb Smith. You still have the other guy that does pan out of those three. So, what I'm saying is like Lorenzo, Deion, and Tobias. Let's say only one of those three guys pans out. All right, so you got that one guy.
Right.
Plus you got Caleb Smith. Plus you got Jaden Thomas. Plus you have the incoming freshman class. Plus you have your tight ends. Plus you have your running backs coming out of the backfield. It's not a situation like it was in 2015 where if Will Fuller doesn't play well or gets hurt, your receiving core goes from really dangerous to just a bunch of dudes. I mean, Amir and Chris Brown were really good complementary players, right? And so that's why the depth is so important. If you lose, gosh forbid, you lose Logan Diggs and Audric Estime for something, you still have Chris Tyree, you still have Jadarian Price, you still have Jabron Payne, you still have Jeremiah Love. That's what's so huge about the depth that they're accruing on offense. Now it's time to put it all together. But they needed that trigger man, and they've got that now. And that's where a lot of the Notre Dame fan excitement comes from, and that's where my excitement comes from, because this is the side of the ball that's been holding Notre Dame back for all these years. That's where I think it really comes down to.
And that's why, really, look, Sam Hartman and Notre Dame is really a great two-way relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great two-way relationship where both sides benefit mutually. It really is. And he is really the cherry on top of the sundae for Notre Dame, right? Because we go back to what Notre Dame's offense was. They lacked numbers. They lacked depth in multiple rooms. They had offensive line talent, but it wasn't exactly being coached up as well as they are now. You had questions of the wide receivers not being coached as well, even though they had some talent there, even though they lacked the numbers. Now you're getting numbers. You have numbers in the running back room, the wide receiver room. You have depth along the offensive line. Even if you decide to add someone in the portal, you have 2 first-round tackles, presumably coming back, that are going to be the anchors of that offensive line. You have youngsters that are looking very well. Most people have been saying, watch this guy next year. Watch this guy next year. This kid could have actually played this year if given the opportunity. That's what you have offensive line, and you trust Harry Heastan. You see Jaden Thomas, his improvement. You trust Chancey Stuckey. You hear what Caleb Smith, the transfer from Virginia Tech, said. We'll get to him in a second.
Mm-hmm.
It was Chancey Stuckey that he made the immediate connection with. So you're trusting offensively the coaching that's happening as well with building out the numbers and getting the talent.
Yeah.
So now you add the quarterback.
Right.
And this is where we get to. There should be no reason because now we've had games where Notre Dame scores 40 points. And what did we say? The games they scored 40, we would come and talk in a post-game show and say they really could have scored 50 if not for this, if not for that. Well,
should have, yeah.
The antidote to the if not for this, if not for that, should be Sam Hartman, right? So the 40 should go to 50. And then the lows should go from 20 up to 30 in those games.
Right.
And this is what you're expecting. And when you make those small changes in every area, you should get the 40 point per game average that we expect this offense to be able to produce.
And more importantly, Sean, can you get to 30 plus in the big games? That's the key.
Absolutely.
That's the difference. And that's where I think that you have the quarterback now to get there. You have the running back talent to get there. You have the offensive line, the tight end, the talent at tight end to get there. But here's the key for Coach Reese. Can you harness it all together into one well-oiled machine? And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing this year.
Yeah.
I really am.
Yeah.
We've seen stretches of it. We saw stretches of it in 2020. We saw stretches of it last year in 2021. I mean, the way that offense was playing down the stretch, I mean, man, if you could put this offense back against Cincinnati,
right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and not even. I mean, I know they weren't playing great teams, but it was just like they were blocking well. Everybody's on the same page. The timing was so much better.
Yeah.
You know, Cohn's confidence had risen back up and all that kind of stuff. It's like, boy, if this team could, but that's always been the story. If the offense from Michigan State would have showed up against Miami in 2017, but that's always been the MO, right? In the big games, the offense doesn't show up. And this is where, and I'm not talking from Tommy Reese's tenure. I'm talking about from the last 12 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the key part is, does the offense, I don't care if the offense, like if the offense comes out and hangs 50 on Navy and hangs 60 on Tennessee State and 60 on Central Michigan and scores a bunch of points on Duke and Louisville and teams like that, and Stanford, who's going to be awful next year, but they score 17 against Ohio State and 20 against USC and 14 against Clemson, then I don't give a crap that they still average 39 points a game. I don't care.
Yeah.
And I don't care if they average 35 points a game because Coach Freeman wants to call off the dogs and all that kind of stuff. But they go out and score 34 against Ohio State in a win, and 33 in a win over USC, or 39 in a win over USC, or 32 in a win. I don't care. Like, just that's what matters to me, and that's what's been lacking. That's what's been lacking is the ability to score against the teams that where it matters. Notre Dame's had no problem blowing out teams that they're better than. Been doing that for years. The exception of this year, right? But that was an anomaly to me. And that's what I think. That's where the excitement comes from, Sean. And I get that. And I get where you're coming from, too, because you're not saying don't be excited. You're saying, let's not put this all on Sam Hartman positively or negatively.
Because it's unfair.
It's now up to him.
It's unfair. Yeah. It's unfair. And you know this. Football is every year. It's a different energy. Every team is different. This version of the Notre Dame football team is going to be different. Yeah, we can talk about Sam Hartman all we want to. You know what I can point to? That 130 yards per game given up on the ground.
Yeah.
Now, we talk about that.
Which is the amount of yards that Sam Hartman's offense rushed for last year.
We can talk about that. Let's talk about that.
See, here's the thing, though. You know what helps that, Sean? You know what helps a rush defense? Is an offense can come out there and just put points on the board
and jump out
early and often.
Oh, absolutely. If you can take a team out of their comfort zone, if you can heck, Caleb Williams wouldn't care because he would love to throw the ball 60 times.
Sure.
And his coach wouldn't care. But if you can put Cal McCord down double digits early in that Ohio State game and pretty much take Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams out of the game and force those young Ohio State receivers that are talented to have to make plays and put it on his shoulders in Notre Dame Stadium, go ahead. Absolutely, you help the Notre Dame rush defense. You absolutely do. And hopefully that will be one of the dominoes to help that. But at some point, that defensive line is going to have to step up. They're going to have to be coached up. They're gonna
and
have
be
to
more
make
consistent.
absolutely.
Yeah. You know, so you want to know one of the weirdest stats of the season, Sean? So if you go to cfbstats.com, you can sort by different categories. So I'm looking at the rush defense, the national rush defense this year, and you can look at it by all games at home, on the road, in wins and losses, conference, non-conference, versus FBS. If you go to versus Power 5, Notre Dame played 9 games against Power 5 teams. They finished, and you look at rushing defense, they finished 12th in the nation in rush defense against their 9 Power 5 opponents. And they finished 12th in the nation in yards allowed per attempt, or 14th in yards allowed per attempt. It's the weirdest stat line to me because they got gashed by Marshall.
Yeah.
Navy got theirs, right? But, like, it's those weird games for me. Like, they shut down North Carolina. They shut down Syracuse. They shut down a lot of good rushing teams, and then they go get ripped up by USC, Ohio State, and Marshall.
Yeah.
It's like, well, then it doesn't matter to me.
Right.
I was having this debate with somebody. Well, look, they did a good job in this game, and I'm like, but yeah, but what did they do in the 2 biggest games of the year, in my opinion, against the 2 best teams they played all year? They got ripped up by USC and Ohio State in the run game. And so, yes, correct. The
Ohio State game is the greatest opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They basically forced Ohio State to have to go to the run.
Right. And that's the big question with Al Golden we'll get into in the offseason is, can he be more of a college coach in year 2 and not as much of an NFL coach, in that he understands the importance of having a more balanced defense as opposed to game plans that are so geared towards stopping one aspect, which you can do in the NFL, right? I mean, look, you take the pass game away from Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs are in trouble.
Yes.
That's just the reality of it.
Yes.
And so, there's all types of things. If you take the run game away from the Tennessee Titans, they're not beating anybody, right? I mean, I'm being hyperbolic. But those are those things I look at, Sean, and I say that the defense has to get to that point. But here's the key. You have the quarterback now that can bail you out a little bit more. Like, having a quarterback like that, whether it's Sam Hartman or Tyler Buckner, because we saw that in the bowl game too. And defense gives up some plays. Defense struggles early, but then Tyler Buckner goes out there and makes some plays. Logan Diggs goes out there and makes a big play. Jaden Thomas, the offense was able to say, hey, you get our back when we need you to have our back. We'll have your back when you need us to have your back. Notre Dame hasn't had that kind of team in a long time. And so the defense is going to have a quarterback now that if they do make a mistake and give up a play, we got you. Don't worry about it. We're going to go out there and do what we need to do. Right? And they should have the type of offense. And this is where Coach Reese needs to get to. And I hope that Coach Freeman encourages this, allows this, then Coach Reese pulls it off, is I want an offense that's going to be much more focused on being great early than this year's offense. I want to be the best. If I'm Marcus Freeman, here's my goal for Tommy Reese. I want to be the best first quarter offense in college football. And I definitely want to be the best first half offense in college football. Because if we can be the best first half offense in college football, our defense is going to be way better.
Yeah.
Because if you have the best first half offense in college football, there's way less pressure on the defense. I don't have to go create things. I just, hey, do your job and make stops. I don't need you to scheme a million different thousand things to say we got to create pressures. We got to make stops because our offense is going to score, make stops. And if that means in some games being aggressive because you think you can go after certain things, and then do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Right. And in some ways you can take 2 approaches to it. One is you can be like Clemson was with Brent Venables. We got a great offense that can bail us out. So we're going to take chances, and we're going to bring some pressures, and we may give up a play or 2, but we're going to force 2 or 3 turnovers, because if we give our offense 2 or 3 turnovers, man, it's a wrap.
It's a wrap.
Or the other way is kind of how Clark Lee did it, right? Which is, hey, look, we're just going to bend but don't break, keep everything in front of you, don't give up the big play, because eventually we're going to be able to make a play to make a stop, right? They both work, but they only work if you have a great offense. Because how did that work for Clark Lee in the title game in 2020? How did it work for him in the ACC championship game in 2020? It didn't work at all.
No.
Because the offense didn't pull their weight. And so,
they had the opportunity, though. Especially if you watch the
yeah.
ACC championship game, they had multiple opportunities to put points on the board and put Trevor Lawrence, who was just getting back into the saddle in an uncomfortable position, and to help out the defense.
Couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it.
Defense had come up with a turnover, tip ball, interception, got stops. Offense just couldn't capitalize and change the trajectory of the game. And you have to be able to do that. Like, especially in these big games, Brian, it's
Mhm.
really starting to be like basketball, man, right? Because you have to score points,
Yep.
and really, it's the team that's able to get stops,
Right.
consecutive stops at the most important time of the game that gives their team the best chance to win, right? Ohio State, Georgia was able to get consecutive stops and give Stetson Bennett and that
Yep. It
offense a chance to win the game.
was huge.
It was huge.
Huge. Well, Sean, here's the thing. You look at Clemson's 2018 title team. They finished 20th in the nation in turnovers forced with 24. In 2016, they had 27 forced turnovers.
Mhm.
Notre Dame this year had 15.
Yeah.
Where would Notre Dame be this year if they forced 9 more turnovers than they did? Just with this year's team, they're
Yeah.
probably at worst 10-2.
Yeah.
If not, because if they would have if they would have matched turnovers with USC, for example, they win that game, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Right? So they lost 3, gained 2. You just take one of those turnovers away, and it's a
Yeah.
different ball game.
Yeah.
Especially if you take away the third quarter the turnover.
Turnover. Yeah.
You know, against Ohio State, it was an even turnover. You didn't turn it over at all, but you didn't force them to turn it over. You're not
Yeah.
going into Columbus and beating them if you can't force a turnover or two.
No.
You're just not doing it. And those are the things, in my opinion, that you need to do. I mean, you know, I just, I mean, you
And
just
once
need
again,
them to play poorly. You know, like
yeah.
Michigan didn't. I don't think Michigan forced any turnovers, but like Michigan just jumped all over them. That's not who Notre Dame was this year, especially by
Mhm.
that time of the year. You know, so you're not going to go into Clemson next year and win that game if you lose the turnover battle, right?
No.
Because here's the thing: Notre Dame got killed in the turnover battle against Clemson in 2015, and still had a chance to tie the ball game at the very end.
Right. Right. I mean, you have to feel confident. Like, the kid only started one game.
Yeah,
Only started one game. So by the time he
yeah.
gets to Notre Dame, maybe he's a little bit better, but he's not going to be a finished product
No,
by
I'm
any
talking in
stretch of.
2015.
Oh, but I'm just speaking like
Yeah,
going into next
yeah,
year, they're going to be facing a Clemson
right,
team that won't have a finished product at
right,
quarterback, and
exactly,
you should be able
exactly.
to create turnovers
Sure,
in that game,
right.
to echo what you're saying.
Because like you lost to Clemson 24-22 in a year where Clemson was the national runner up. You had the
Mhm.
ball. If you get a 2-point, well, first of all, if you'd have kicked the extra point the first time, then you're kicking an extra point to go to overtime, and you've got all the momentum.
Yeah.
Different conversation for a different day. But my whole thing is you lost that game by 2 points in a game where you had 4 turnovers and they had 1. And I'm not even counting the shanked punt that went like 15 yards that
Right.
gave them another touchdown drive, and you lost by 2 to the eventual national runners up. That's what I'm saying is like, but when you have an offense that can put the other team's offense in a pressure situation like Clemson was this year because of the special teams in the offense, right? Then the defense can turn the heat up a little bit and say, hey, it's 14-0 in the fourth quarter. Our offense is we're in a let's go after them here,
Yeah.
and then that's how you put a game away. So having that offense is going to be such an important thing,
Heck
right?
yeah.
Such an important thing.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So what's the next part, Sean? Is the transfer stuff.
Yeah, the
Let's
transfers, man.
let's look at them. So we talked about Sam Hartman, but Notre Dame's got a couple other important transfers that we're going to talk about. They got Caleb Smith at wide receiver.
Mhm.
Finally had a chance to dive into some of his film this weekend. Then they got Thomas Harper, defensive back from Oklahoma State. So let's start off, Sean, talking about Caleb Smith. I know you guys had him on your show recently,
Yeah.
and very interesting kid. It's
Yeah.
it's weird that they're gonna have 2 kids named Caleb Smith on the team next year at receiver, and they both spell their name with a K.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's no like what do you do on the jersey, right? Like with the
Yeah.
Adamiolas, like it's Jay and then Jus.
Yeah.
What what do you do with these? There's nothing you can do. Like
Yeah.
old Smith, young Smith. Is that what you're gonna do for the jersey? You know.
Yeah.
But anyway, you had him on there, Sean. So just kind of talk about what you learned about him as a young man, and then we'll talk about him what we
Yeah,
saw from him.
of course, you love him because he's a Virginia guy.
Of course,
He's a
which
Virginia
means he's a
guy,
baller.
right? He's a Virginia guy. He grew up playing ball with Chris Tyree.
Mhm.
They've known each other since they were small, so they have a relationship. And immediately on his official visit, the crazy thing is he was watching the practices and he said the 2 guys that impressed me the most were Tyler Buckner and Tobias Merriweather. He was like, "There's no way that kid is a freshman." He said, when I found out he was a freshman, he was like, there's no way. So it goes back to what you're saying. Like, yeah, the talent's there, the wide receiver room. He recognizes the talent on this team and the opportunity to be in the spotlight, the national landscape of college football, and have a chance to win a national championship. He recognizes that. And it wasn't something that he brought to the table, it's something he felt as he was standing there. He was hearing that talk in the bowl preparations, like, yeah, 2023 national championship. So now, as we said, this isn't something that's just popped up since they got Sam Hartman. This is something that's been going around the building in anticipation of adding those extra pieces to go along with the vision and the plan that they already have for 2023. And the kid pointed out that he was limited in the route tree at Virginia Tech.
Oh,
He's
man.
being given the opportunity to run different routes, play different positions, because pretty much he was a 50-50 guy or a short drag across the middle guy. And he said, Coach Stuckey, we made an immediate connection. The man he is, the family man he is. Caleb has a fiance, so he's already locked in with his family. He spent the holiday with his in-laws up in Pittsburgh. And that's just you talk to him, he's just a great young man. And he's a leader, right? Captain, multi-year captain at Virginia Tech. He's expected to come into a young wide receiver room and still be have that same leadership for those guys. And his connection immediately with Tobias Merriweather might pay benefit, because that's a guy that he expressed that he wants to lock in with and be there for him and to help him. So he's a great young man. He's a great addition on and off the field and in the locker room for Notre Dame. But his goal, and this is him, he said, I'm trying to win the Biletnikoff. And I was like, yo, I don't know the last wide receiver at Notre Dame that I actually heard voice that.
Sure.
Like, my goal is to win the Biletnikoff. And I said, that's great to hear. I love it. I love it. So this is the type of young man you're getting in that room, the type of athlete. And for me, it's going to be very interesting as we talked about the offense progressing and the production that they can have. It's going to be very interesting to see. I don't know if the correct word is tempted, but it's going to be interesting to see how Tommy Rees goes from the strength that has been the tight end traditionally in Notre Dame through the passing game and go more to what we saw in the Gator Bowl with diversity in the passing game and getting 4 or 5 guys in that wide receiver room involved, which you can clearly see with Sam Hartman being able to spray the ball around the different areas. And then you include the running backs in the passing game. Now you make it a lot more difficult for defenses to be able to lock in on certain trends and certain guys. So he just adds to that ability in the wide receiver room. He is a fantastic addition to the Notre Dame football program.
Well, and that's the thing, Sean, that at times can be a little bit, I'll say frustrating, is because we do see that at times from Tommy Rees. And not just in the bowl game. Because the bowl game, you could say, look, you had a month to prepare for that. Okay,
right.
That's fair. Very fair comment to make. Like we saw this in 2021 and at times as well. You look at USC, for example. It had 7 different guys catch passes in that game. Lorenzo Styles had 3 for 57. Kevin Austin went 4 for 39. Deion Colsey had 1 for 13. Avery Davis 2 for 10. Braden Lindsey had a catch. But then also Braden Lindsey had a 14-yard run in that game as well. That was when the offense first started kind of getting going. And then you had the win over North Carolina. You had Lorenzo Styles caught 3, Avery Davis 5, Kevin Austin 3, Braden Lindsey caught 1. Plus you had, I think that was a game too where Avery Davis had a run in that game for 10 yards. Go to the Navy game. Notre Dame had, Kevin Austin caught 6, Kyron Williams caught 7, Deion Colsey caught 1 for 31, Avery caught 2, Tyree caught 3 for 15, Lorenzo Styles caught 1. So you started seeing like a lot of different guys using the ball. You go to the game against Virginia where they didn't throw it a ton. They only threw it 23 times that entire game. Kevin Austin had a touchdown. Braden Lindsey had a touchdown. Plus, Braden had a reverse for 31 yards. Lorenzo Styles had a reverse for 37 yards.
Yeah.
So Lorenzo Styles only had 1 catch for 4 yards, but he had a reverse for 37 yards. And so we've seen this at times. I mean, the Georgia Tech game was a little hard to evaluate because there was such a blowout. They had like over 10 guys catch passes in that game. Stanford game was very similar to that. You had Braden Lindsey catch a touchdown pass in that game. Kevin Austin had a big game in that game. Lorenzo Styles caught 4 balls in that game. So we've seen stretches of it, but yeah, to your point though, that's going to be the challenge for him is you've got a lot of different possibilities to throw to next year at running back, tight end, and receiver. How do you utilize them all? And how do you part of that's, being more 20 personnel at times, 21 personnel at times, 11 personnel than what we saw this year, which I think he'll do. I don't think he's married to 12 personnel just because. I think he was married to 12 personnel so much the last couple of years last 3 years, because that was your best position group on your football team most years.
Yeah.
I mean, when Brock Wright is legitimately your third tight end, you've got a loaded tight end room.
Yeah.
And you're stupid. Think about George Takis, who was BC's leading receiver this year. And I think Ryan will be able to tell you better, but a guy that I think has a shot to get drafted if he tests well was their fourth tight end on that 2020 team. Fourth. And so, I mean, that's just one of those things, Sean, where you look at it and say, you've had depth there. Build around your strengths now. Caleb Williams to me is a guy, Sean, that I see. He's a very intriguing player because he's not real fast.
Smith.
Right. Caleb Smith. What did I say?
You said Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams. Caleb Smith is not real fast. He's a good athlete, very strong. I'm watching the Pitt game, and Pitt's got a pretty good secondary. And he just makes two just stupid catches in one-on-one coverage on the sideline. And you're like, that's the kind of ball Sam Hartman's made a living throwing at Wake Forest. And he was covered because he doesn't get like a ton of separation. But again, part of it's because he ran like 3 routes. He ran like a post, a go, and like a hitch.
That's it.
It's about it. It's about all he ran. He ran like a snag every now and then, but that's basically the same thing as a hitch. And it's just like, that was it. There was no, he'd run a comeback off the go route and catch some balls off that. But there just was no, he's going to run a lot more different type of stuff that's going to help him get open here. He's a lot like Jaden Thomas, but brings a little bit more savviness as an outside player. I think he's going to be kind of a rotation part of their team. I don't think he's he may have his sights set on the Biletnikoff, but I don't see him being that type of player, me personally. If I'm wrong, that's awesome. But I just think he's more of a do-it-all kind of guy that complements the other players. But, man, at the very least, you're bringing in a guy, Sean, next year that can catch 40 passes for 700 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns at the very least.
Yeah.
If he has to be the guy.
Yeah.
At the very least, he can put up those kind of numbers because he did that at Virginia Tech this year. He went 30 for 600, and they had no kind of play. I mean, I wouldn't trade Notre Dame's quarterback play this year for Virginia Tech's.
Yeah.
Like, not even close. And so he, if he's the guy, then he's gonna put up some pretty good numbers as a possession kind of guy, because I think that's where he's going to look more. He's going to look more like that in this offense. It reminds me a lot of us. You could see him being used a lot how they used Javon McKinley 2 years ago. Like vertical guy, hitch guy, one-on-ones, back shoulders, and stuff like that. But also a guy that he brings a little bit more fluidity to the game than Javon McKinley did, in my opinion.
Yeah, Javon McKinley with a quarterback with a little bit more guts, probably would have had an incredible final year.
He was money in all their big games. When Ian Book would actually attack downfield, North Carolina, Clemson, they couldn't cover Javon.
No.
So I could see that, Sean. I could see that. And so I like how he fits into this. But he also gives you insurance if Dion doesn't take that step. If Tobias doesn't take that step.
Yeah.
You have this kind of guy that you can go to. And you have Jaden Thomas, who stepped up to a degree. So, again, what it does, Sean, it puts you in a situation where you don't have to play a freshman. If a freshman plays, it's because he earned it.
He's earned it.
And you roll with it.
Yes.
But it gives you you're going to hear us say this phrase a lot. You want to be in situations where you have a wider margin for error. Meaning like Bama last year. They could survive losing John Mechie and be just fine. They could not do is survive losing John Mechie and Jamison Williams. And so that's one of the things that cost them a championship. So Notre Dame needs to be in a situation, Sean, where if a guy doesn't step up and another guy gets hurt, you're still good enough there.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame for too many years has been in a situation where if they lost a guy they were screwed.
Screwed. Yeah.
And you're not there now, receiver. If Chancey can develop this group well, but Caleb Smith, the transfer version, gives you a much bigger margin for error in this situation.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to add to the sentiment that you were talking about, he raises the level in the room.
Yeah.
He raises the level of expectation in the room. I think his leadership is going to be vitally important. And the fact that he came in and immediately identified, like, yo, this kid can be great. I want to help him be great.
Mm-hmm.
That works wonders. Like, nobody told him. That wasn't something that Coach Stuckey said, yeah, we would appreciate if you know. That's who he is as a leader. And for him to be watching practice and say, yo, he's different.
Mm-hmm.
He moves different. Like, yo,
and that was Tobias, right? So he's
talking
about,
when he was talking about Tobias Merriweather, he's like, I want to help him. I want to lock in with him and help him be great.
Because Tobias has such better. This is what that looks like. Tobias has much better physical talent than Caleb Smith. So if Caleb Smith, if Tobias can learn from Caleb Smith and play the game with the focus to a detail, the attention to detail, the route emphasis and things like that, then like, wow, what does this game do? Because if you give Caleb Smith 2 extra inches and a tenth or so, or 2/10 off of his 40 time and about 3 inches longer arms and all that, guess what? He is a dude that maybe can go out and win the Biletnikoff, because then he'd be Tobias Merriweather.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's huge, because you said, Sean, you're either that way or you're not.
Yeah.
Even if Notre Dame asked him to do it, if that's not who he is, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't think the Packers wanted Brett Favre to mentor Aaron Rodgers? Of course they did.
Yeah.
But of course they did. But it didn't matter, because Aaron Rodgers wasn't going to do it.
Right. So, yeah, I'm excited about him and this next guy that we watch film on that came from Jim Knowles' defense. We kind of faced him in the bowl game.
No, actually, he did not play in that game.
He didn't play in that game. You're right. He was injured.
Right.
Abe, let me tell you something, man. Have you ever got a gift, and initially when you got the gift, you said, oh, okay, thank you. It's nice.
Sure.
And then you open it and you start using it, and you realize how much easier it makes life and what you do. And you're like, yo.
First time my dad got me a calculator.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Dad.
Right.
Freaking heck do I want a calculator? Then you start, like, oh, this is freaking, you know how easy it is for me to tabulate batting averages now?
And, yo, that's kind of the gift that is, Thomas Harper, transferring from Oklahoma State. I think both of us initially like, yo, this is solid pickup.
Yeah, good depth piece.
Good depth piece. And then we started watching the film over the weekend, and it's like, yo.
Yeah.
We might have something here. And, we both mentioned one game in particular.
Yeah.
Like, go watch the TCU game.
Yeah.
And that's when he really stood out for both of us.
Yeah.
He's a nickel safety. And look, most guys are either physical guys, struggle in coverage, or good coverage guys that really aren't as physical as you would like them to be. Yeah. He almost gives you the best of both worlds. He really does. Like you mentioned it when you can talk about it because you compared his cover skills to Tariq a little bit.
Yeah, so I did a breakdown on him at Irish Breakdown, and I just put it into the chat. So if y'all haven't read it yet, check it out, because I do some things. I break down his film with writing. I also show some clips of all the different places he lines up on the field. But he's not as quite as good of just a pure cover man as Tariq, but it's not that far off. And if you look at his numbers this year, Tariq gave up a couple more big plays, so he gave up more yards per completion than this kid did. This kid actually allowed a lower yards per completion than Tariq did this year, which is impressive when you consider how good Tariq was this year. He's bigger bodies, 5'11", 180. Tariq's about 5'10". He's a little bit longer, but he can be used in so many more different ways, Sean, because like you said, like Tariq is just put him in the slot and let him cover.
Let him cover.
And this kid can do that. But what this kid can do too is if you look at so the two games I evaluated for the purpose of the breakdown, I've watched other games. I went back and watched some of his games last year. And then he had a huge game against TCU 2 years ago. Is that he's a nickel at Oklahoma State. But what they would do is within their nickel package, they would move him around.
Yeah.
So he'll line up in the slot like Tariq did. He would line up sort of in the slot as sort of an off man type of look where he could kind of roll down and play man. He could play quarters. He could play over top and play like a cover 2 type of look, which they would do all those different things with him. And then they would at times have him as the boundary guy, right? Yeah. Or not the backside safety, where he would then play the alley. They would have him play pure cover 2 over the top, which he did a little bit more against Baylor than he did against TCU. And then at times he'll play just single high.
Yeah.
He did all that within their nickel package. So it's not like he played safety in those looks and then nickel. He was always the nickel. It's just where they moved him around. You couldn't do that with Tariq Bracy. You had to go sub package to get there.
Yeah.
And with this kid is he can give you depth at safety, but also it can be your nickel. But you can also do more things now out of your nickel, which, look, the reality is, here's Sean. Tariq Bracy played a lot of snaps this year for a reason. It's not because Notre Dame had this infatuation with like, oh, gee, we got to do that. It's because look at all the teams you're playing to throw the football. And then, you look at your schedule next year and, the Notre Dame 2023 football schedule, which I'm pulling up here right now, isn't exactly devoid of teams that like to throw the football, right? I mean, Ohio State, USC, Wake Forest, Clemson, Stanford's going to throw it even more next year than they did this year. Duke with Riley Leonard, Louisville with Jeff Brom, NC State and Pitt with Phil Dracovic. I mean, almost every team on your schedule, with the exception of Central Michigan, and I'm not familiar with what TCU does, Sean, so I can't speak about TCU. I mean, TSU. But the only two teams on the schedule that I look at and say, boy, these teams don't really want to throw that ball around are Central Michigan and Navy.
Yeah.
Everybody else wants to throw the ball around a little bit. And so I look at it and say, you're gonna be a nickel a ton next year. A ton.
Yeah.
You're thin at safety. If you had to get in a situation where one of your safeties had to be a nickel, you literally don't have a safety rotation anymore. So now if this kid can be the nickel, now your corner depth and your safety depth can be used for those positions.
Yeah.
And I think it was important. And like you said, when you look at the skill set, good speed, not elite speed.
Yeah.
Really quick feet, plants and drives downhill on routes really well, takes great angles on routes too. He's coming across on an overcut and he's playing kind of like down through the receiver. When the ball comes, he jumps in front of it and breaks it up, or at least makes it to where he undercuts the route and then the quarterback has to try to fit it wide, and then it's harder to get the ball in there.
Yeah.
He's a guy that understands when he gets in trouble, he knows how to get out of it. There was a route that I think was against TCU where he's playing kind of off man and the guy hits him with a really good out stab and then beats him to the post. He does this perfect spin move and gets right back on top of the guy within like 3 steps. Not because he's an elite speed guy, but because his transition was, oh, I got myself in trouble. I know how to get myself out of trouble right now because he's an experienced guy. He's a 5th-year senior this year, Sean, in the same way that Tariq Bracy was a 5th-year senior.
Yeah.
This kid played all 4 years at Oklahoma State. He doesn't have a red shirt. He's only coming back because of COVID. That's the only reason he can come back.
Yeah.
And that's why Tariq was back this year. So somebody in the chat asked if Tariq has any eligibility. No. Tariq literally played 5 whole seasons at Notre Dame. It's just the COVID year gave Tariq a chance to come back for a 5th year. And boy, were they saved by that. Could you imagine what this Notre Dame defense would look like this year if Tariq Bracy didn't get the COVID year? Not good.
Yeah.
Not good, which speaks to some of the recruiting woes that were here before Mike Mickens arrived. The point is, however, this is a kid that knows how to get himself out of trouble. And that's something that Cam Hart is still learning a little bit as a corner, is when Cam gets in trouble, his reaction is grab. And he's got to learn. He got better about that as the season went on. It was really only an issue early when he was not comfortable with the hamstring. Late in the year, Cam was much better about that.
Right.
But, this is a kid that understands how to play. He looks comfortable playing in zone. He looks comfortable playing in man. And you can do a lot of different things with him. Like I'm thinking about him and Xavier Watts and Ramon Henderson as a starting tandem at safety and nickel.
Yeah.
And thinking of all the different things you can do, rolling those guys and robbing those guys. And, with him and Xavier Watts, kind of which one plays the alley. And I mean, you've got a lot more options now. with what you can do out of your nickel package, because you're going to have to be a heavy nickel team next year. Dude, look at the schedule. I mean, there's a ton of passing teams on the schedule. Louisville wasn't a big passing team this year with Malik Cunningham, but they sure as heck will be next year with Jeff Brom. You know what I mean? So Riley Leonard was a dude at Duke this year. He was excellent at Duke this year.
Absolutely.
I think he's only going to get better, and they're going to have some guys come back. Mike Elko did a phenomenal job with that football team this year, but that's a team, they threw for barely over 3,000 yards this year. They're going to throw for a lot more next year, Sean, in my opinion, because that kid can play, and they're going to have some weapons. So I really feel like this was such a big pickup just because of the nature of what you do. But then you study the film, and you're like, boy, this is even better pickup because this kid's film. Now, is he Denzel Ward? No, I'm not saying that. He's not that kind of athlete, but this kid knows how to play.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that. And I think he's going to fit in really well because he comes from an offense or a league that has a lot of teams that like to throw the ball and score. And he played well. And the TCU game, Sean, if you go look at it, he got hurt late third quarter.
Yeah.
And now it could be a total coincidence, but when he got hurt is right about when TCU started their comeback against Oklahoma State.
Yep.
And just, he wasn't there in the fourth quarter. He wasn't there in overtime. And that's when TCU came back because the final score is 43-40. They scored 13 points in overtime. So they had 30 going in, and then they scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. TCU did.
Yeah.
And all of that was done without Thomas Harper being on the field. But when he was on the field, TCU couldn't do a whole lot.
They couldn't do a whole lot.
So.
And that makes, we're talking about Sam Hartman making everything better or things easier and vice versa. Notre Dame making things easier for him. I think what he was asked to do in that defense coming into Notre Dame, in my opinion, being around better talent in front of him and next to him, especially in that DB room next year. It's like now he can be a specialist in so many different ways. And Al Golden we talk about it. Look, he loves to get his safeties up around the line of scrimmage and bring them on third downs, zero concept, fire concept. Look, you have a guy that can really do it and do it really well and cover and tackle. To me, he improves the tackling in the secondary immediately. So
yeah, that's a good point. So Tariq was a surprisingly good tackler at Notre Dame this year. Like Tariq did a surprisingly good job. He had a couple tackles for loss. The problem with Tariq is he had to win as a tackler by getting past blockers with his speed.
Yeah.
Because he had a hard time getting off blocks because he's just small.
Yeah.
This kid is a little bit more effective getting off blocks. I mean, he's a 5'11", about 180, 185. So he's not going to just like be throwing dudes, right?
Right.
But he does such a good, because at Oklahoma State, whether he's playing safety, like an alley safety or the slot, Sean, he's responsible for, you are the force player outside. You cannot let this ball get outside of you.
Right.
I broke down about 4 or 5 games of him this weekend, and every game he did a really excellent job of, even when he was getting blocked, he would get himself to the outside and hold firm.
Yeah.
To where they'd have to cut inside of him, and that's where all his help was coming from. So that's an important thing. And to your point, he is good at coming up and outrunning guys. He understands angles. He's a solid tackler, and that's so important for that nickel position. If you can't tackle in the nickel position, man, like you just can't play it, man. You just can't. Like Deion Sanders back in the day couldn't play that. That's not the ideal player you want at that position. That's where that's your boundary corner. Just let that go cover all day.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't care if you make tackles or not. Just don't let me catch the ball. You don't have to tackle anybody.
Yeah.
This nickel spot's got to be a guy coming up, taking on blocks, attacking the perimeter, making tackles in space, all that. And he's pretty good at that.
Yeah.
Now you're going to put him and Cam Hart to the field together.
Right.
And that's where you start feeling like, okay, I got a little something there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and if Jay Mickey takes the next step,
right,
and then you still have Clarence Lewis, like, what are you doing with him? Does he become a hybrid? Does he kick inside to help? Or does he, they're going to be extremely talented in the defensive backfield, and they're going to be better off, in my opinion, at the safety position than they were coming into the 22 season.
Yeah.
So expect Al Golden to continue to be aggressive
Yeah.
when he gets these guys in the spring and he sees what he has.
Yeah. Agree. So there's one other player I want to talk about in the portal, Sean, too, and that is a player that Notre Dame has not landed yet, nor do we know that they're definitely going to land him, but he's a guy that visited this weekend, and that is Byron Vaughns from Utah State. Very interesting player, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
And he was listed at 6'4", 245 at Texas. He was listed at 6'4", 230 in 2021, and this year he's listed at 6'4", 225. And he's a guy that is probably more of a Viper. Now, at Utah State, he'd play both. So at Utah State, they'd play kind of like left end and right end.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes he's matched up against the tight end, and sometimes he's not. I mean, now he would play right and left end, but they weren't like switching weak and strong the way that Notre Dame will do. Field boundary, basically. But he's a guy that probably projects more as a Viper at this point in time, unless he can add a little bit of strength and size. I think he projects more as a Viper, so he doesn't really project to fill that Justin Adamiola role, but he's a guy that brings some pass rushing ability. I was not thrilled to see him as an option because you just look at his numbers. He had 2 sacks this year and 4 sacks last year.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a couple things. I studied his stats beyond just the sacks because I've always said this. Sacks don't always tell you the story. But if you look at some of his numbers, Sean, he actually had more pressures this year than Isaiah Foskey had either of the last 2 years. If you look at Pro Football Focus, his win rate on pass rushes this year was higher than Isaiah Foskey's was each of the last 2 years, and it was better than what Will Anderson's was last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, that's going against Mountain West talent for the most part. But one of the things I did is I went back and watched the Alabama game because they played Alabama this year, and he looked like he belonged. To be completely honest with you, Sean, like he wasn't dominant. He's not a guy that's going to come in and be Isaiah Foskey if Notre Dame were to get him, but he gives you just another long, kind of twitchy sort of player off the edge that just enhances your ability to just be multiple there. And potentially, even though if he can't play big end, if you get him, he may be able to help you move Junior Tuihalamaka to big end, which is ultimately where I think Junior would his game better fit. It's kind of playing that Justin Adamiola role that also can play like some of your nickel stuff, but also can play big end. And that's kind of how I see this guy projecting. He's just kind of a pass rusher, and a guy with some potential as a pass rusher, Sean.
Well, it was shocking for me because you hear Utah State and you say, but like you said, he was at Texas first, looked upon as a pretty good recruit. He goes to Utah State. And I remember watching that Utah State BYU game because that was the game before BYU was going to take on Notre Dame. I remember watching that game. And in that game, the commentators talked about Utah State leading in sacks and pressures over the last year and a half. And I'm like, really? So I started to really pay attention to the guys on the front. He was one of the guys that immediately jumped out, especially in the first half of that game. BYU started to get their run game going in the second half, but their pass, man, they struggled in their pass game because Utah State was getting a lot of pressure, a ton of pressure, and taking the quarterback off his spot consistently. And he was part of that. So I agree with you.
He had 3 hits according to He had 3 hits on a quarterback in that game according to Pro Football Focus.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's when he jumped out to me. So when they said his name in the portal, I really knew. I'm like, oh, okay, I remember this kid. He jumped out to me in that BYU game. Yeah, that would be a really good pickup because you need that depth. You expect Botello, you expect Burnham to take a jump and be one of those guys coming off the edge with speed. I really like Jordan Botello. It's just for him. I'm happy. A lot of people can be upset with production, but people don't understand mentally what it means for Jordan Botello and Maris Leofow to make it through a season and be able to complete a season healthy. Like for those guys, they're healthy. Now, let's go play, get better. If Jordan Botello, it was also always about opportunity and finding a spot. And I think he's found
and staying on the field, not getting himself in trouble and staying on the doghouse.
Absolutely.
But the talent's never been the question.
Talent's never been the question.
Notre Dame staff loves Josh Burnham.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of optimism those two guys can be dudes. And then, like, if this kid comes in and he's part of that, you've got a deeper rotation, and then you can do more with Junior. Maybe he plays the Bo Bauer role in nickel, that as that kind of that middle pass rusher, dropping in the middle in coverage. Maybe he can be a big end. Maybe he can take on the Justin Adamiola role. Who knows? But that's kind of what you like to see. So those are three of the transfer guys that we wanted to talk about, Sean. If there's more guys, like, we're not going to break down Anthony Lucas. I know that's one of the guys people want to talk about. I don't see them getting Anthony Lucas. If they get him, we'll break him down, and he's a stud, right? There's no doubt. But I just don't see Anthony Lucas being a guy. Notre Dame's certainly going to go for him. I don't think Notre Dame's really recruiting CJ Williams all that hard, and I don't think CJ Williams is all that interested in Notre Dame, and I'm totally fine with that. Totally fine with that. So, that's kind of that there. So as more guys come along, Sean, we'll break down more guys.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good wrap on the transfer portal talk for now. Before we move on to the title game stuff, Sean, I do want to ask you all to do us a favor. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. If you have not done so, please subscribe to our Irish Breakdown channel. I'm always telling people to sign up for the CFB Nation channel and podcast channel, and we want you to sign up for that as well. But if you haven't signed up for the Irish Breakdown podcast channel, do that as well. Make sure that you are checking out our videos at CFB Nation, because we're trying to get those hours up and get those hours monetized for that. Or get those hours up so we can get that channel monetized. But of course, if you're listening either on the CFB Nation app or the CFB Nation channel or the Irish Breakdown channel, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star review. And of course, Sean, check on our main site at irishbreakdown.com. And you can also sign up for our newsletter. I'm back to being able to send those out every day. And always, Sean, message boards, be on it. Tons of good football conversation at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So check that out as well. So tonight, Mr. Davis, it's a national championship game between the Georgia Bulldogs, which isn't a huge surprise to people, and the TCU Horned Frogs, which is a huge surprise to people. And what a great run. What a great run that they've been on this year. Absolutely great run.
Yeah.
Everybody kept counting them out. Ryan predicted against them like almost every week we had TCU in. Great at coming from behind. And everybody kind of dismissed them against Michigan, but I had a feeling that Michigan was going to have a problem with their playmakers, and they did. They got a big win against Michigan. 2 pick sixes helped with that. Georgia comes out. We all expect Georgia to be good again, but can they really repeat after losing 15 guys in the NFL? Well, they're on the verge of it, right? They run the table, go 12-0. Not a really tough regular season schedule. They handle their business in the conference title game, and then they get the Buckeyes, who I would argue are about one of the only 2 or 3 teams in the country that you could say has as good of a roster as they do, and really played from behind the whole game and did what they needed to do. When it was money, that's the team that made the money plays, not the Buckeyes. And so
absolutely,
it just great story how they got here. The only loss of the 2 teams is TCU losing to Kansas State, which was a rematch game. So literally both of these teams beat every team they played this year, right? So now you get it. So you've got the defending champs, the big favorite, 12.5 point spread last I saw, which was a couple of days ago, and TCU's the underdog, the great story that nobody thinks can win, Sean. But I hope I'm hopeful that this is going to be a much better game than people realize. I hope that people finally realize, like, this TCU team is here. This isn't some NCAA tournament. You made a run because all the higher seeds got beat in front of you. Remember that, in Loyola, the championship or the Final Four a couple years ago, and Michigan made it that year too. Like, I think most of the time they were playing like lower seeded teams. Fab Five made their run. People forget, like, that a really good Arizona team got upset by East Tennessee State in the first round. So the Fab Five is in the second round, not playing a 3-seed Arizona. They're playing East Tennessee State.
Yeah.
Right. So we see stuff like that happen all the time. This is a team that had to go out there and beat some really good football teams, and they earned their spot here. Is it going to be enough? We're going to find out tonight. But I'm just glad it's not 2 SEC teams, 2 big teams. You know what I mean? Like, same old, same old. I'm actually very intrigued by the fact that we have somebody kind of kicking down the door.
Yeah.
And I hope that it makes for an entertaining game.
Yeah, I don't know about other people, but I'm an individual that loves to watch greatness, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's a team or a school that I might not particularly care for, I love to watch greatness. I'm not exactly the biggest Alabama fan, but heck, I love watching Bryce Young. Love
Mm-hmm.
watching that kid, right?
Just wish he
I
wasn't stuck with a
I
garbage offensive coordinator
Yeah,
the last 2
I
years.
tell you all the time, like Brian, I'm telling you, every year I find a team like, oh man, I'm going to watch this team at least
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 times, just because I fall in love with a quarterback or I fall in love with certain players, and I'm like, I want to watch them. TCU was one of those teams this year. It was
Yeah.
just one of those teams, and I think it was the Oklahoma State game when they came back, and I said, oh man, I think I'm going to tap into this team. Now, the one thing that plays out, you mentioned the 2 times they played Kansas State in both games. Kansas State jumped out and they were able to come back the first time. They weren't
Was it
able to
like
completely come back.
28-10, something like
Yeah,
that, Sean, right? The first
yeah,
time?
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because, and this might play into tonight's game. We'll see. They struggled with the tight ends of
Mm-hmm.
Kansas State.
Yeah.
They struggled to cover the tight ends
And
of
Michigan.
Kansas State, and they struggled to cover Loveland and Spoonhour against Michigan. Exactly. So you already know the 2 tight ends. If Donnell Washington does play tonight, you already know the 2 tight ends that Georgia has.
Yep.
And that is the focus and the key to their passing attack. And I think once Washington went out, that's why Georgia's offense went to that little
Right.
lull going into the
Mm-hmm.
third quarter. However, the counter that Georgia has this year that they didn't have particularly last year is that they were able to get the ball to 6 different wide receivers against Ohio State.
Yeah.
4 of those wide receivers had receptions of over 20 yards. So they have 4 guys that they can go get big plays from in the wide receiver room. The Smith kid, A.D. Mitchell, who also had a touchdown in the CFP last year against Michigan, and he made a big play against Alabama. So he was injured, hadn't played since week 2. He comes back. I think in the first half, Stetson Bennett and himself in the red zone, they missed each other where he was supposed to run an out route, and he ended up running a fade a little bit. They got it back on track in the fourth quarter and ended up connecting on the game-winning touchdown. TCU is going to be in this game early. TCU is not scared. They're not afraid of the moment. The moment won't be too big for them. They've won too many different ways. They have to come back from big deficits. They played slobber knockers where it was 17-14 on the road against Texas. They've done it every which way you can do it. And they have players.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They have a 5-star
And legit speed. That's what people dismissed in the Michigan matchup, Sean.
Absolutely.
And that's why I predicted TCU to win is Michigan has not played speed like this with a team that uses the speed. Ohio State didn't use their speed against Michigan.
No.
This team did, and Michigan, and that was with Kendre Miller getting hurt. And that I'll get to that too here, Sean. That's one of my big concerns for tonight. But you are correct. This isn't some Cinderella team that, oh, gee, you just hope that they can. No, this team has legit NFL talent at various spots. I just don't know if it's going to be enough.
No.
That's the question.
Look, this is the thing. People like you, right? Mm-hmm. We sit and talk, and we sit here and wonder, like, man, the secondary was the weakness last year. The secondary is the weakness this year. Like, how are they doing this with the secondary being the weakness? But
because they can score now.
They can score.
That's the thing. That's what Georgia could not do early in Kirby's tenures. They could not score.
Yes.
So when their defense had an off game or wasn't as good as people thought, like they couldn't win because they couldn't score.
Yeah.
And that's like I've seen people in the chat. I've seen this on other areas, Sean. They'll say you can't defense wins championships. Y'all, I've been saying this for about 4 or 5 years now. That's over. For now. I mean, it's cyclical to come back, but right now, defense will get you to the show.
Yeah.
But you're not winning a championship if you can't score. This is one of the worst defenses Georgia's had in the last 4 or 5 years. Now, again, worse for Georgia is still pretty good, right? But this isn't a vintage 2021 Georgia defense.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be.
No.
Right? No. So if they're off, they're like, and they're good at time. I mean, they were great against Tennessee.
Why would you expect them to be with everything they lost? No one expected them to come back and be that level of defense
but they can
that they
score.
were last year.
That's the difference.
Yes.
And so you got to be able to score. And now when you look at this matchup, Sean, for me, I don't look at it from the TCU standpoint for a second. When I look at TCU, the first thing that stands out to me is they do have the ability to do some things that can give Michigan problems. Because my concern for Michigan in that matchup was TCU had some guys that just can flat out run.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing was I was never a big believer in Michigan's secondary.
Yeah.
I just wasn't. I just felt, and that's why I felt like Ohio State missed such a huge opportunity because they just didn't attack them. They didn't go after them. They just tried to dink and dunk their way up and down the field.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Day was so unaggressive in that game. But teams that have been a little bit like Penn State early was able to get some shots down the field, but then they just couldn't protect the quarterback later. Michigan was not a team that, to me, can handle speed for 4 quarters. And that's what hurt them against TCU. Early on, Kendre Miller was ripping them up, and then he got hurt. And then, they did a decent job on Quentin Johnson early in the game. But as the game wore on, they couldn't stop him.
No.
And he ripped off some of those big plays. And I mean, Michigan did a good job of taking like Tay Barber and Darius Davis, not letting those guys make plays. But because you were able to help win matchups there, you left yourself exposed to Quentin Johnson, who went for over $160.
Yeah.
And then because then they start to vacate the box a little bit, and that's when TCU started gashing them in the second half.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this team dangerous, because if you're commit enough resources to the perimeter to protect against the speed, you're then vulnerable to them running the football, because they run the football pretty well.
Yeah.
But that's going to be the key, is they've got to be able to get their pass game going. Got to be able to get their pass game going against this Michigan team, because when they run the ball, they're hard to beat. And that's honestly what got them back in the game against Kansas State, because Dugan. Then this is the thing that you got to be a little concerned about if you're Georgia. Max Dugan is now had back-to-back off games.
Mm-hmm.
They beat Michigan, and he didn't even play that well, in my opinion. They scored 51. Okay, 51. They scored 37 on Michigan offensively.
Two pick sixes, right? Yeah.
So 37 on Michigan, still a lot of points.
Yeah.
Right? On that Michigan defense. They still scored 37 points against Michigan.
Yeah.
And still had some big plays. Still had 488 yards of offense, 7.0 yards per play against Michigan, with Max Dugan just kind of not being on top of his game.
Right.
He went 14 of 29 through 2 picks in that game. He only completed 50% of his passes against Kansas State. You don't want to hope. You got to hope that you can keep that going if you're Georgia, because it's kind of like, is he really going to have a third straight bad game?
Yeah.
Because if Max Dugan plays sharper football, then this offense is really scary good, Sean.
Yeah.
Because they do a decent job of protecting the quarterback, but the reality is I don't think Max Dugan is that guy.
Yeah.
I think Max Dugan was in the Heisman ceremony because he happened to be the starting quarterback on a playoff team. I mean, his numbers weren't knock you off
probably
numbers. He's a gamer. He's gritty. He's just going to battle. He's going to leave everything he has out on the field.
Yeah.
He's going to make plays. But the thing that if he can't be more efficient tonight, then I don't think TCU has a shot.
And see, that's the
especially
problem.
With Kendre Miller out.
Miller out.
He may
Pete McCardo still had a great game.
Yeah.
Coming in against Michigan.
Yeah.
But see, this is the thing. Kirby Smart, in my opinion, I forgot who broke this down. I was watching, I think it was Aaron Murray. And he was breaking down how genius Ryan Day was in his preparation for Georgia. Because he just didn't depend on the talent of his quarterback and his receivers. They changed the launching spot of where Stroud threw from 70% of the snaps.
Which is why he was able to scramble more.
Absolutely. So now that changes the pass rush lanes and opens up lanes for Stroud to be able to make his plays and use his legs. And that was something watching the game that just really didn't jump out to me. And he was like, this is really what opened things up and gave the extra second to a second and a half for the receivers to be able to make plays. Because you have to understand, look, and people might push back. Quentin Johnson is considered what? Either 1 or 2 and the wide receivers coming out?
Sure.
if Marvin Harrison Jr. was coming out, it wouldn't even be a question who the number one receiver coming out would be. It's not even a question. So when people start to talk about his match, look, I don't go get any DB in this country and ask them to go man to man on Marvin Harrison Jr. They're getting embarrassed.
Yep.
They're going to get embarrassed. It's a fact. He's that dude. So when you come into a concept with TCU that is really a lot of drags, overs, posts, deep balls, that's their system. Dude, they have over 20 plays of 50 yards or more this season. That's insane.
They live off that.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. So you have to figure that Kirby and Will Muschamp are going to say, just like they did against Tennessee. Tennessee lived off the big plays.
Mm-hmm.
They said, you're not going to get us downfield. And if you do so, you're going to have to do it fast because we're not about to allow you to sit back there.
That's the key right there.
I'm waiting to see what Kirby's plan is going to be for this offense because you know he's going to come with one, but it's going to be whether or not that defensive backfield and defense can properly execute it and tackle.
See, where I think we could see this game come down, Sean, is I think there's a couple keys for Georgia's defense. Number one is do not let them be balanced. Mm-hmm. Do not let them be – you have to shut down the run.
Yeah.
You have to try your best to shut it down with your box. If when TCU struggles offensively, Sean, it's when they can't they're not balanced when they can't run the football. And they have to be able to run the football. I mean, they barely beat Baylor. You remember that? How they had to come from behind to beat Baylor, who's just kind of okay. They ran for 115 yards that game.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you can't do it. They can't win those games. They struggled.
Yeah.
They beat Kansas by only a touchdown, only rushed for 144 yards in that game.
Yeah.
They've got to be balanced. Got to be balanced to have a shot against a good team. And so if I'm Kirby, the first thing I'm doing is I'm saying, number one, I'm going to take two things away from you. I'm not going to let you run a football. I'm not going to let you beat us with RPOs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be aggressive. Now, if Max Duggan beats me because he hits a bunch of perfectly thrown balls down the field, tip your cap to that young man and you say, hey, more power to you.
Yep.
But I'm not letting him I'm not letting him do the quick stuff. Right. And so I'm taking that stuff away. I'm going to make him beat me on the overs, the crossers, the goes, the posts, because here's the thing. If I'm dominating the line of scrimmage, just like you did against Tennessee, then guess what? You're going to have time to get to those throws.
Yeah.
The other thing too is Max Duggan is not overly accurate on a lot of those downfield, like some of those. I mean, he'll miss downfield shots. I mean, he'll hit some, but like the Quentin Johnson one, that dude was wide open.
Yeah,
like he could like underthrow it because the dude was wide open. And so to me, I'm gonna make Max Duggan beat me throwing the ball down the field. Because I don't think I'm going to give him enough time to do it. Like they did a really nice job against Tennessee, I thought, Sean, and you can tell me if you disagree with this. I thought one of the things they did a really nice job of against Tennessee is they took away the quick game.
Yep.
And they took away the ground attack.
Yep.
They said, you're going to have to beat us down the field, but we don't think you can protect long enough to beat you down the field. Now, TCU has a better pass protection than Tennessee does.
Yeah.
But not so much better that they can't get pressure on the quarterback.
Right.
I'm going to because here's the thing. If Max Duggan is, if I can just get my big old D linemen get their hands up and just get a push, I think Max Duggan's going to miss on enough throws that we're going to get our stops if we take away the RPOs. Because here's what that does, Sean. If you take away the RPOs in the run game, you take away a lot of stuff they love to do on first and second down.
Mm-hmm.
They love to get into 2nd and 2 and then take their bomb, right? They love to get into 3rd and 1 and take a bomb because they're going to go for it on 4th down.
Yeah.
Like that's what TCU wants to do. And so to me, like that's where I look at it and say, I want to see this team because I'm trying to find it here real quick. They attempted like 25 4th downs this year.
Yeah.
Which isn't a whole, but they'll do it. They'll go for it, And so that's the thing for me is I want to see that if I'm Georgia. I want to see them shut down the run and taking away the quick stuff. Because if they can nickel and dime me all day, that's going to set up those big plays down the field.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think Georgia's got to really be great on 1st and 2nd down. And how do you do that? Take away the quick game, take away the run game. Make Max Duggan beat you down the field. Because I don't think he's good. If CJ Stroud wasn't good enough to do it for 4 quarters, Max Duggan's not going to be good enough.
Yeah.
Because I could see this game being a shootout. I could.
Yeah.
I really could.
And the other thing I would like to point out is that you can sit up here, you can talk about Stetson Bennett not being that good. He can be a game manager. We just watched the team play maybe a C-plus game against Ohio State.
Yeah.
But when it came to that, they have been built to understand how to win. They know how to win football games. I cannot tell you how important it is for players in a program to know how to win a football game, to take it play by play, to not be taken off of the focus of what needs to be done because you're down 10, because you're down 14. Play football. They know when it comes to the fourth quarter, they expect to dominate that fourth quarter. Doesn't matter what the score is going into that fourth quarter. If it comes down to the fourth quarter, they expect to dominate the fourth quarter. That's how you win big time football games.
Right.
That's what they did to beat Alabama last year. That's what they're going to have to do tonight. Because I don't expect TCU to run. I expect TCU to be there. But look, this is the thing. If Georgia plays their A game, it's not going to be close. That's just the thing. If they both, if Georgia is running the ball,
what does it mean by not close?
No. If it's going to be,
I'm
they're going to cover the spread.
Okay, so what I'm saying is like you're not saying like 51-14 is
no.
Like Tennessee, like the Tennessee game,
like
27-13.
Yeah, that margin. No. It's not going to be close because you're talking about Georgia. If Georgia's playing the A game, they got 3 running backs. They're running the ball.
They'll dominate the trenches, Sean. Georgia playing the A game dominates the trenches because here's
Carter is dominating on the defensive line.
There are matchup advantages for TCU in this game where they're simply better. Their receivers are better than Georgia's secondary across the board.
Yeah.
Now, Keely Ringo can run with these guys, but I think you've said this to me, and I know Ryan said this to me too, and you guys are both right. He does not play the ball real well.
No.
So, and Johnson's a big kid at 6'4". He can beat him in some one-on-ones, even when Keely Ringo's in position.
Yeah.
There are areas where Georgia is not as good as TCU, in my opinion. But that's why, if you mentioned their A game, you can't have a Georgia A game without them dominating the trenches.
Absolutely.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
And that's where I think TCU could get in trouble. Because I think Georgia is actually a kind of team that could kind of run the ball on. TCU's got a better run defense than people give them credit for. I've been saying this for a while.
Georgia has 3 different running backs and 3 different styles.
I'm not even worried about the running backs. I'm worried about them leaning on Georgia the way that Michigan couldn't.
Oh, yeah.
Because Michigan's offensive line is really good. This Georgia offensive line is massive.
Yeah.
And I think they could just lean on them.
Yeah.
And so I just look at it and say, Sean, you're correct. An A game from Georgia, TCU is just not going to have enough possessions, which then leads to them feeling a little pressure, like we got to score on this one, which then leads to mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to Tennessee. Tennessee started feeling pressure of not being able to score early. And boy, we got to go then make a play. And that's when Hendon Hooker started making mistakes that he hadn't made up to that point in time of the year.
Yeah.
Because they felt that pressure of, we're down and we're not scoring and, they're kicking our butt in the trenches. We got to go make a play. And when a team gets into that, we've got to make a play now mode. That's usually when they make a mistake. Yeah. The making a play has to come within the framework of the offense to win a game like this, right? But when you're down and you feel like I got to go do something to get us back in it, that can be a problem, man. That can be a problem. And so that's the key for me. Like to your point, if they're playing their A game, it means they're dominating the trenches and they're efficient offensively. That's what the backs bring to the table. But if they're not playing their A game and TCU's playing their A game, which means balance on offense and things like that, that's where Georgia could get in trouble.
Yeah.
That's where they could get in trouble.
That right there is what you pointed out. They weren't able to run the ball for 3 quarters against Alabama.
Right.
In the championship game. And then all of a sudden, the fourth quarter, they just wore them that man.
Yep.
Those big bodies, when you get to the fourth quarter, like literally, I was watching Ohio State, and Ohio State was flying around on defense in the third quarter. And they got to the fourth quarter, and literally their linebackers were just accepting the blocks. Right. Just like, I don't have anything left in my legs, man.
Yeah.
It's a bad spot to be in. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced that in athletics, what it's like to just be like, yo, my mind's saying one thing, but
My body's saying
My
somehow.
body saying, I can't do it. I can't do it. I want to.
It's the opposite of that old R. Kelly song. My mind's telling me yes,
Right.
but my
My
body
body's telling me no.
my
It's
mind's telling
yo, I can't. I want to,
right,
but
right.
and they know how to win football games.
Yeah,
And they're not as I guess as sexy as
sure,
Alabama's run.
sure.
They just know how to
But
win
here's the thing, though,
football
Sean.
games.
This version of these teams, as
Yeah.
currently constructed, so does TCU.
Mhm.
And that's what I think some people are dismissing a little bit about this matchup because Georgia, if they play their A game, is going to win. But Georgia hasn't played their A game a lot this year.
Tennessee was it.
To your point,
That was the
agree.
game. That was the game they got up
Agree.
for. Yeah.
Where they were an A game, because you say A game, that's both sides of the ball. They were an A
Mhm.
game on offense against LSU, but their defense struggled. I mean, their
Mhm.
defense never stopped LSU. LSU stopped
No.
themselves. I mean,
Yeah.
really. I mean, Jaden Daniels was throwing the ball on them in the first half.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like they padded their stats in the second half when they brought in the backup quarterback. He did the same exact thing that Jaden Daniels was doing in the first half. We've seen this a lot this year. And so that's my thing is they've got to be efficient on offense because one thing that allowed Ohio State, to, in my opinion, to be in that game was Georgia had a lot of misses in that game too. And Stetson Bennett has had some of those moments this year, Sean, where he has kind of gotten in a bit of a funk.
Yeah.
And TCU's defense is very opportunistic. And that's something that I'm really curious to see is they're going to have to make some mistakes. Because what was the thing about Michigan early, Sean, right? It was Michigan doesn't beat themselves. They don't beat themselves. You've got to outplay Michigan. You got to beat. That's what the mantra we've been saying about Michigan for 2 years. They don't beat themselves.
Mhm.
You've got they beat themselves against TCU because TCU does some stuff funky on defense where it's like, okay, I thought this guy was going to come or I thought this guy was going to drop. And they do some. Joe Gillespie does a really nice job. He knows my dudes are not as good as your dudes. They're just not. So I got to do some stuff to allow my kids to play to their potential and cause confusion among the other team. And they do a good job of that. Georgia's handled that stuff for the most part relatively well. But we have seen Stetson Bennett this season, even more so than last season, Sean, get into some funks. And that's the thing that I'm curious about if I'm TCU is there a way for me to kind of get him into a bit of a funk? And if you can do that, I think you got a chance, right? Because if you can defend them the way Tennessee defended them, you've got a chance. The problem is that Tennessee's offense couldn't match it. Stetson Bennett wasn't great against Tennessee.
No.
But it didn't matter because
No.
the defense it looked like a vintage Georgia defense. We just haven't seen that a whole lot this year. And that team also had Nolan Smith.
No.
And this team doesn't.
That front seven made Hendon Hooker uncomfortable from the first snap of that game. They came after him. And then when they started implementing different packages and looks and blitzes from the secondary in the second half.
Yep.
And then the only reason that game was even close, honestly, is Stetson Bennett turned the ball over and made a couple of mistakes, and then they started raining late in the third quarter.
Right.
And they kind of just shut it down offensively.
Right.
Because Georgia ended up fumbling the ball in the fourth quarter and giving Tennessee an opportunity to score. Yep. And it's like
the game. I think TCU can hurt them more in those instances than Tennessee had. And that's my point, Sean, is TCU will make them pay in ways that Tennessee could not.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I think. That's what I think is going to be the key for this TCU team is you've got them. You can't just go mano a mano and, in my opinion, outplay Georgia for 40 minutes. Ohio State tried and they couldn't. Right. You've got to make them make mistakes. You've got to force turn. You've got to get the ball. You've got to put yourself in scoring position. You've got to, when they blow a coverage, you've got to take advantage. And that's what TCU did against Michigan. They maximized the turnover opportunities. And when Michigan made a mistake on defense, and it wasn't often, they made them pay for it. And that's why you talk about why they have so many plays of over 50 yards. It's because they're great at that.
Yeah.
They're great at why? Because they're not just great at they're going to make a mistake, so let's take advantage. But they create those mistakes schematically.
Yeah.
And then when the mistakes happen, they're in position schematically to burn them with it.
Well, I will tell you this. I'm glad it's TCU playing Georgia
Yes.
Because Georgia would have killed. If Jim Harbaugh and his Eagle would have tried to come in and physically just push Georgia around for 4 quarters, it would have been another blowout.
Bad match. Man, you know this, right? Like, football is all about matchups.
Yeah.
Georgia is a awful matchup. Awful matchup for Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the worst matchup for Michigan.
Worst.
And so that would have been ugly.
Yeah, ugly.
That would have been really, really ugly.
Because Harbaugh's ego wouldn't have allowed him to say, we
Right.
need to do something different.
Right.
We need to spread them out, throw the ball. No, they would have tried to come in, ground and pound, and they would have looked up and they would have been down 20 points early in the game.
Yep.
And then it would have gotten uglier. With the opportunity that even with 1 5-star on their roster, TCU has the athletes to be able to take advantage of the weaknesses of Georgia and make it a ball game. And even with that, there's a possibility that Georgia could not play their best game and still rise up in the 4th quarter and win a championship because they know how. And let me tell you something that's very important. We talked about Sam Hartman. You pointed out the pieces, and the pieces are just not the players on the field. The coaches matter. Let me tell you something, man. Todd Monken, Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart, they got a pretty good coaching staff over there at Georgia. They're pretty good. And they're not pretty good at preparing. They're pretty good at noticing what's happening during the game and adjusting and making sure that they're doing what they need to do to get to the championship 15 in the 4th quarter and win that championship 15.
Yeah.
Like, Kirby Smart had 2 of the best timeouts ever in college football playoff history.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. His timeout to stop the fake punt, that was the ball game. That was the ball game. And it probably wasn't just him. It was the coaching staff up in the booth.
Yeah. Exactly. It was being prepared to say, hey, here's what we're looking for here.
Absolutely.
If you see this, let me know. Because it's hard for me to believe that from where he was on the field that he could see that.
Yes.
But he's communicating. What are they doing? What are they doing? And when they saw that, timeout. They have a very good coaching staff.
Yes.
I think that's also why TCU has been good this year. Don't tell me coaching doesn't matter.
That's absolutely
when I look at TCU and I say they didn't gain a bunch of transfers this year, they were more impacted negatively by the transfer portal than positively, because they had Zach Evans on their roster last year, at running back.
Yeah.
They lost their real good defensive end last year to Nebraska. So like, don't tell me that the transfer portal doesn't matter. Like, they went to the transfer portal. No, they didn't. All they did, Sean, was change their coaching staff. And all of a sudden, the speed that was there that was not utilized correctly before is good. And it's a great story, too, because the funny thing is Max Duggan didn't even win the starting. Now, he had some injuries or some health issues that led to that.
Yeah.
But he didn't win the starting job out of camp.
Yeah.
He didn't take over because the Chandler Morris got hurt in the first game of the year. So this is what's going to be fun about tonight. Like last year, it was a really well-coached and talented Bama team against Georgia team against an even more talented, not as well-coached Alabama team. Because I don't remember, Nick Saban is a legend. He's the greatest head coach of my generation.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, even the great ones make mistakes. And the coaching staff around him the last 2 years has 2 years, not 2 to 3, 2 years, has not been as good as his past teams.
Yes.
The defense has been a problem for longer than 2 years.
Yes.
But at least 3 years ago, they had Sark.
Yeah.
And they had Kyle Flood. And so it didn't matter if their defense wasn't that good. So that's the thing for me is that's what the difference between Georgia and Alabama right now. Alabama is still the most talented team in college football.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yeah.
They'll still have more guys drafted over the next 2-3 years than anybody else in college football. But they're not the team they used to be because they're not coached as well. This is 2 really well-coached football teams. Really well-coached football teams. Because TCU just out-coached Michigan, and Michigan is a well-coached football team. They made Michigan flinch. Because here's the thing. You talk about that stupid 4th down reverse call that Michigan had.
On the first series.
Yes, but it's because TCU stopped them on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down that they felt they needed to go to that play. They flinched. TCU didn't. This is a good football team, Sean. I think this is going to be a good football game. I really do.
And you point that out. I will say this though: if you watch that first quarter, TCU really didn't get a hold of things until maybe in the first quarter, second quarter. Because if you look,
Offensively, you
yeah,
mean?
because Michigan drove the ball down the field. They
Yeah.
just blew the opportunities to score early in the game.
Right.
Like they
A
blew
couple.
they
Yeah.
blew 14 points.
Yep.
But that's on them.
Right.
If Georgia's the first run of the game was like what 50, 60 yards for
50,
Dylan
54 yards, I
Yeah,
think.
for
Yeah.
Dylan Edwards. Like, and so it took TCU a while to kind of get used to, okay, this is what we need to do. All right. If they allow Georgia to get those type of plays early in the game, being physical and running the ball, I don't think it's going to be as advantageous because Georgia's not going to get inside the 5 and panic.
Yeah. Right.
They're not going to get inside the 5 and panic because at that point you have to choose your poison. Okay,
Right.
do we double Brock Bowers or do we stop this run?
Right.
Which one are you going to do? And so that is, in my opinion, that's the challenge. And Michigan really could have done the same thing because they have 2 young tight ends that are really good, but they just panicked as a coaching staff, went to the trickery, and it's like once they did that, I knew they were in trouble. That early in the game, I'm like, oh, they're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
They're in trouble because at that point, if I'm Harbaugh, I feel better getting stopped on the half-yard line, trying to run the ball up the middle, or trying to run the ball in, and just saying, okay, that's fine, that's
Right.
okay, boys. Rather than trying that little trick play.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yep.
no, we're going to do what we do. If it's not good enough, okay, we go back to the drawing board. We go back out there and we continue pounding them because they have to come out from this 1-yard line.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just mentality. I think that's why I said Kirby and that staff, they're going to keep Georgia, no matter how the game is going, they're going to keep Georgia focused on this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
This is what we need to do.
Yeah.
We're gonna take them to deep waters.
Yeah.
In the second half and the fourth quarter. And once we get there, we're going to prove that we're the better team.
Yep.
I think
so let's go ahead, Sean.
No, I was just saying Michigan didn't have that focus as a staff.
Because Michigan went away from what got them there.
Yeah.
They flinched. That's what I said. They flinched. And that's why they got beat. So let's do this, Sean. We're going to end with 2 things. Number one, we're going to go, what are the key? If Georgia wins, it'll be because of this. If TCU wins, it'll be because of this. Then we'll give our predictions, and then we'll finish up with a couple. There are a couple mailbag questions I want to get to.
Cool.
So, Sean, let's first dive into this here. So if Georgia wins tonight, it'll be because why? I'll let you start.
If Georgia wins tonight, it's because Stetson Bennett plays one of the best games that he's played all year. Because I think he's been unimpressive this year, in my opinion. He struggled against Missouri. That's why they struggled. He struggled mightily in other games. I forget they struggled at home against a team,
Kent State
early in the year, where he was just awful, and he struggled in the third quarter against Ohio State. If Stetson Bennett plays mistake-free ball, he doesn't have to be Mr. Everything that throws to 400. If he just plays efficient football and is the leader that they need offensively, Georgia's going to win this game.
Mm-hmm. For me, for Georgia to win this game, I think they're going to have to be able to pressure up front. Because I think even if Stetson Bennett plays well, they can lose if they can't slow TCU down. And we saw this. We saw this with Michigan. We've seen this other times. I think this matchup is not ideal for Georgia if it comes down to a skill-on-skill matchup with their offense against the Georgia defense. So they're going to have to dominate up front. I think that's true on both sides of the ball. If they dominate up front, then I think on offense, Sean, then I think that leads to what you're talking about, Stetson Bennett, in an efficient game plan because he's getting to a lot of second and manageable, third and shorts where he can then, hey, just get the ball out. We don't need you to go make a crazy play. Let's stay on schedule. That's going to then keep TCU off the field. That's going to allow the TCU or the Georgia defense to kind of put them in some bad spots too. So I think it's going to be about dominating in the trenches for me. and not making Stetson Bennett have to beat TCU. That's going to be the thing for me.
But I think that's what Todd Monken does. Todd Monken never gives a game plan to Stetson Bennett where it's on his shoulders.
Right.
Because even the throws he has to make, like we're talking about quick screens, we're talking about the tight ends. They have the best put you in a quandary 12 personnel.
Yeah.
In all of college football.
Yeah. And they actually use both their tight ends in the pass game. Imagine that.
So now you can't focus on one or the other.
Right.
So you have these two tight ends that they can split out.
If he's healthy, you can do everything you want to do to stop Brock Bowers, and they're going to fine. Darnell's going to go out and catch 5 or 6 balls. Ladd McConkey's going to catch 6 or 7 balls. Right. We're going to take some shots downfield to Aaron Smith and all these other guys, and it's a hard offense. Actually, it's going to sound crazy. Georgia fans are going to lose their minds when I say this, but I feel like just Georgia team would be incredibly hard to beat if they had a better quarterback.
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. I know that's not going to be well received by some because of all the hype around Stetson Bennett, but
look, and the reason I say it because I love Todd Monken and what he does. I think he does a great job of not only creating from formations, but his timing. And you talk about this all the time. Certain guys just have the knack for when to call a play. Like that's a gift. Like everybody can say, okay, this is my preparation. These are the plays I want to go to. But it is a gift to know when to call a play at what time and when to have a play and when to save it for the right time in a game. Todd Monken has that gift.
Yeah.
And he's just blessed to have those two tight ends to be able to stay in 12 personnel and to stay in 12 personnel and to force teams to go small.
Right.
Like not a lot of teams can do that.
Yeah.
Like you split Brock Bowers out and they say, well, we need to bring in an extra DB to be able to deal with him. And now what do? They just motion Brock Bowers back and let him be an H-back and here's the run game.
Yeah.
Out of 12 personnel when you've gone small. They put you in a quandary defensively, and based upon what you do, then they know and dictate what's going to be coming in the second half. So we'll see, because Washington being healthy tonight and playing, if he's not playing, it makes it
a little bit
easier for TCU. Yeah. If he's playing and he can be,
because it impacts the run game too.
Absolutely.
Brock Bowers isn't out there dominating 9 techniques in the run game.
No.
Right.
So it's going to be very instant. But your point is, man, if they had a top-notch quarterback with the offensive talent they have.
I'm not even talking Caleb Williams.
No.
I'm not even talking about him. Right? Like I'm just talking, yeah. Yep. So, that'll be very interesting, Sean. Very, very interesting. So let's flip it on the other side, Sean. If TCU wins tonight, it'll be because why?
Because they get big plays. They need at least 5 big plays in this game. 5.
On both sides or total both sides?
I'm just talking offensively.
Okay.
They need 5 big plays because they have to do things that forces Kirby Smart to go away from what he wants to do. Right? So you're talking about challenging Max Duggan and saying, okay, make the plays. If Max Duggan comes out and he hits 3 or 4 plays, then Kirby's like, okay, now now we have to do something. Then they get the running game going. Then they start running Max Duggan and adding that to the running game. And now, Georgia's running all over the place. It's going to be very interesting if they can get Georgia to that point.
Yeah.
To be able to have to adjust and not really know how to combat what's being thrown at them. It's going to be interesting if they can do that.
Because they can't methodically just consistently move the ball up and down the field. Georgia.
No.
They just can't.
No.
And even with the way that Max Duggan runs around and scrambles, they just can't do it. I agree with you completely, Sean. I think there's 2 other things for me that are going to be important. Number one is they're going to have to force turnovers. They're going to have to get some balls away from Georgia. They're going to have to take fumbles, picks, whatever. Yeah. They're going to have to get the football.
Yeah.
And then the second part of it is they have to start well early.
Yeah.
And I said this about Michigan in the Michigan game. I said TCU is going to have to – I said this in our preview before the playoff game with Ryan. I said TCU is going to have to jump on them early because they are not going to be able to come back against Michigan the way they did the Big 12 teams.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true tonight as well. TCU is not going to be able to get down 28-13 against Georgia like they did against Kansas State and come back and win. They're not going to be able to get down, was it 20-some points against Oklahoma State, against Georgia the way they did against Oklahoma State and come back and win. They're going to have to get up early and then hold on, just like they did against Michigan, to have a chance to win. And so not quite that way because Georgia doesn't necessarily milk the game away the way that Michigan does. But they're going to have to start fast because you don't want that doubt creeping in your mind. Like, with all due respect, they were ready for the Michigan game, but this isn't Michigan. This is Georgia.
This is a different beast.
Right?
It's a totally different.
Yeah. And so they got to come out and have some early success on both sides of the ball, get some points early, get some stops early, and say, hey, we belong here. We belong here. Yeah. Like you talked about the Michigan game. They didn't look like the team they were the rest of the game on the first couple plays of the game. No. As Michigan went right down the field, got in that red zone. It wasn't until they made a couple plays and all of a sudden, hey, you know what? Like we just stopped their running game. We just stopped their running game. We belong here. They are going to need that early, in my opinion, Sean. Yeah. So, what was your prediction for the game, Sean? It's funny is you actually predicted a closer game than I did.
Yeah, I forget the score, but I know I have
41-30.
Georgia pulling away late in the game. Yeah.
I had 41-24. I just don't think Max Duggan is a guy that's capable of making enough plays to win this game. I don't. If I'm wrong about him, then my score is going to be way off, and I think TCU has a chance to win. I think it's a much better TCU team than people have. They have one of the best corners in the country.
Yeah.
They're very well coached. They have legit home run hitters across the board on offense. And they have a gamer at quarterback, a scrappy gamer at quarterback, man.
Yeah.
And if they can force some mistakes, I think they can win this game. The thing is, I'll say the same thing about Georgia that I've said about Michigan. They just don't beat themselves. You've got to beat Georgia. And for the last couple of years, only one team was able to do that, and that was Bama in the SEC title game. They just were better. They just had better dudes.
Yeah.
And Georgia doesn't beat themselves. I mean, they didn't beat themselves. It came down to it, which team is going to flinch, and Ohio State flinched and Georgia did not.
Yep.
Because you said they've been here before, and they're very well coached. They're not going to flinch. Kirby's not going to flinch. Kirby's not going to overreact and make some dumb fourth down and goal reverse call. Todd Monk is not going to make that call. Kirby's not going to make that call. He's not going to call some panicked onside kick if they're down. Things like that can get you beat. That's why I'm at it. But I'm not going to lie. I'm pulling for TCU to win. That's who I'd like to see win. But I just don't think it happens tonight. But I would love to see it because then I can stop hearing there's so many things that would just be able to just say, okay, stop saying that, stop saying that, stop saying that. That's where I would like to be. So, Sean, let's wrap this up. We do have a couple super chats I want to get to here.
Let's get to it.
Got a super chat from our friend in Germany, Michael. Hi, Irish Breakdown. Imagine the last season if we would have a really good transfer quarterback despite Pine after Tyler Buckner got hurt would be a total different season, I think. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that, Sean. Notre Dame this year was a quarterback away from being a much better team. I don't think they were a title contending team just because there were some other flaws. The defense wasn't quite as good, but you're not winning the championship with a linebacker play Notre Dame had this year.
No.
Right.
No. And it goes back to the overall point that we talked about in the first segment. Like, be fair to Sam Hartman in this situation because there are other things, whether it's via the portal or via coaching, that have to be done to really make sure that this team gets to that ultimate goal of winning the national championship. But he is a piece. He is a really nice, incredible piece that Notre Dame needed. They got him, and couple that with the improved play that we saw from Tyler Buckner and Kenny Minchey coming in January, your quarterback room is so much better than it was this time last year. So much better. There's no denying that.
Yep. Let's go next to Tom Connor. Tom asks, will Notre Dame have a top 5 quarterback room next year? Hartman, Buckner, and Minchey. I think we should also include Steve Angeli this year in that as well. Sean, what are your thoughts on will Notre Dame have a top 5 quarterback room next year with Hartman, Buckner, Minchey, and Angeli?
It could.
That's it right there.
Yeah,
potentially.
Potentially.
Right.
Potentially. Because we just don't know. Like I said, there's so many first-time guys. We have to see these first time. I mean, if Cal McCord comes out, he's on the same track as CJ Stroud, and he progresses like that.
Sure.
Then
And they got Devin Brown as a backup. They've got the
kid coming in, right?
Right. You look at USC because here's the thing is you got to look at some of those depth charts like USC, for example, and say, well, yeah, Miller Moss isn't as good as maybe Notre Dame's backup. He's not better than Tyler Buckner, but Caleb Williams is much better than Sam Hartman, right?
Yeah.
I mean that's the way you look at it. So they have a chance to be, but Sam Hartman's got to prove what he can do in the Notre Dame offense too, right? Like,
and I mean Malachi by the middle of the season might end up being the backup for USC,
possibly. I got some issues with Malachi, but he's very talented. We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. But yeah, it's a show me thing. I mean, the only position groups right now, there's actually three position groups in my opinion right now on the Notre Dame team that I'm saying right now going into 2023 are top 5 national position groups.
Yeah.
Quarterback's not one of them. It's just not. It can be sure. It's running back for me, offensive line, and cornerback.
Yeah.
And that's separating corner from the secondary as a whole. The secondary as a whole is not a top 5 group, but the cornerback room to me is,
right.
In my opinion. You're going to be hard pressed for me, especially if you consider Thomas Brown a corner as a slot guy, although I think I'd probably fit him more as a safety the way that Oklahoma State used him. But how will Notre Dame use him? That's going to be a different question. So, yeah, we'll see about that one. And then Tom Connor also asked, will the offense be better than the defense next year? I think so. I'll just say this, Sean. I hope so. Because I think the defense is going to at least be good next year. It was good this year. Like, Notre Dame's defense did not suck this year. Like, there was another question that we got from somebody, Sean, that was like, I hope Al Golden's not another Brian Van Gorder. Are you – what? Like, Al Golden was not good this year compared to Clark Lee and Marcus Freeman and Mike Elko, right? Notre Dame still had a top 30 defense this year.
Yeah.
When we criticize Al Golden, is he doing a good enough job to win a championship? Brian Van Gorder wasn't even competent as a defensive coordinator. So, like, they're in different universes.
Yeah.
Right? It's just, is he doing a good enough job to say, hey, can Notre Dame win a championship with him, with the defense playing the way they did? No. But the defense was not the reason Notre Dame went 8-4 this year, the regular season. It was the offense. Now, the defense needed to make some stops here and there, but it should have never come to those situations.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Sean?
Absolutely. You're spot on with that. So, look, they should be. I think Notre Dame knows that.
Yeah.
I think they expect that. And I think there will be a shift from the long time, keep us in games, keep us in big games, and try to do enough to win.
Yeah.
That has been pretty much the mantra for Notre Dame in big games. This is the year that changes.
Hope so.
This is when the shift changes.
Right.
And now the defense gets a little bit more support from their offense. And now now they can go out and play a little bit looser, hopefully.
Right. And we know the special teams is going to be good.
Absolutely.
That's another part too. Raymond Harton with a super chat. Thank you very much, Raymond. Do we expect to get any help from the portal for our D line? At least some depth pieces. Thanks, guys. Well, that's kind of what we talked about in that section, Sean, is, there's we know Byron Vaughn's on campus this weekend. They've had some other guys on campus on the D line, which, I'm sure names will come out at some point in time. Whether or not they'll get those guys remains to be seen. I mean, those guys have, Byron Vaughn's has a lot of big-time schools coming after him, USC, Florida State, so they're in the game, but we'll see if they can close. Yeah. That's been an issue for Notre Dame right now. Look, recruiting isn't just a high school thing for Al Washington. They've already had one big loss on the D-line. The best D-lineman they could have picked up this cycle, in my opinion, is going to Florida State. And the second best one, they're not going to have much of a shot at with Anthony Lucas. I mean, I'm not going to hold him too much of that against Al Washington. I don't think that kid really wanted to come to Notre Dame. But, there's some other pieces on there he needs to get, Sean.
Yeah.
And will he get them? I don't know. We'll find out. Adam Ziliak, Brian and Sean, how much better than Hartman would Buckner have to be to beat him out? I don't think I just think He needs to be – Sean, can I answer it this way? He needs to be a guy at the end of camp that says, this guy gives our team a better chance to win football games. It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not by – he needs to prove he can win games at a 12% higher rate than Sam Hartman. It's just who gives you best chance to win football games?
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Let me tell you something, and this is not me. This is something that Malik Zaire said. He said Sam Hartman has more pressure to prove himself in the spring than Tyler does. He said Tyler got so much respect from that bowl game. He was like, you have to, the players respect Tyler. And he's going to be working through the offseason. They're going to respect him when he walks in the spring. Sam Hartman, to those players, is just a name. He's going to have to come in and prove himself.
Right.
And that's going to be the challenge. So, you know, it's just not as easy as everybody thinks, like, okay, he just walks in and he's just like, I got the respect of this team. No. Yep. He's gonna have to earn it. He's gonna have to earn it because the other guy has been through the battles.
Yep.
And has earned the respect of those guys. So it's not just going out there on the field and making the throws. You know, you have to earn the respect of those guys in the huddle. Those linemen, they love Tyler, man. Those guys love Tyler Buckner. Like, we're not just blowing smoke.
Right.
When we report, like the people inside the building.
And he's the reason ultimately that Drew Pine left.
Yes.
Another very well-respected player.
Yes. So,
yeah.
Look, you know, he's going to – if Tyler Buckner wins, it's because Tyler Buckner has become a really good quarterback. A really
consistently.
Good quarterback. Yes.
Not had a great scrimmage this week and not the next week. It's going to have to be
every day.
More often than not, he was the best quarterback out there.
Yep.
And I'm just not sure he's ready to be that kind. That's the thing is there's going to be days in the spring and fall where Tyler, you're going to be at practice and you're like, wow, 12 is the best quarterback on the roster.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's going to be other days where you're like, yeah, that was rough. That looked a lot like the Marshall game.
Yeah.
You know, and that's going to be the key for Tyler is the consistency.
Yeah.
That's going to be the big key. That's going to be the big key. Jonathan Gabrick says, Mailbag, if Cliff Kingsbury being fired, does Alabama look at him as the new OC if Bill O'Brien leaves to be the Patriots OC again? That would surprise me a little bit, Sean. I don't think Nick Saban's an air raid guy.
No, and I don't think Kingsbury is on the same level as, you know, the guys that he had that eventually became head coaches. So, no. Look, Nick Saban knows what needs to be done.
Yeah.
He knows what needs to be done. And I fully expect Nick Saban to do a better job in hiring his coordinators than he's previously done.
Yes, because his current hires right now are not good. They're not good. And I've been banging that drum for a while.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Joshua B. asks Brian and Sean, what does Hartman's draft stock look like if he goes 11-1 with a college football playoff berth, 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns?
Well, doing it at Notre Dame is totally different than doing it at Wake Forest. That's how the scouts would view it.
Right.
Because of the schedule.
Right.
And the big games.
Right.
It definitely improves everything. Like, that's why I say it's a perfect two-way relationship. Like, Notre Dame is doing just as much for him and how he's viewed as he's going to do for Notre Dame on the field. So it's a great relationship.
If Ian, this is going to sound like I'm taking a shot at Ian Book. I'm not. If Ian Book, with his production or lack thereof, and his limitations that were very obvious on film about reading defenses, can be a fourth-round draft pick out of Notre Dame, because what's the Ian Book winner? Played under the spotlight for years, leader, all that stuff. Sam Hartman would have that as well, but he would have incredibly greater production.
Yeah.
I mean, like incredibly greater production, Sean, than Ian Book did. So, I mean, could it vault him up to day 2, early day 3? Maybe.
Well, right now, Double R told us he's pretty much 5th round right now. That's what the feedback he's been getting.
I've heard
scouts.
5th from him, and then another guy we talked to down in Jacksonville said he was like 6, 7.
See, there you go.
But like, that's the turnovers, it's the mesh, it's the off, and that's one of the knocks on him is like, dude, you got to. Its offense is a little bit funky. The reads are funky. The advantage for him is if he does come to Notre Dame and produce, he's doing so in a system that we've heard coaches say a lot of really good things about.
Yeah.
And so, because look, here's the deal. Sam Hartman's problem isn't production.
No.
Right? Ian Book for his career at Notre Dame, in his career, threw for 8,948 yards. He was a starter for Notre Dame for basically 3 seasons. Threw for 8,948 yards and 72 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Right? And he also rushed for 17 touchdowns. Sam Hartman's been a starter about 3.5 to 4 years at Wake Forest. He's thrown for 12,967 yards and 110 touchdowns, and he's rushed for 17 touchdowns. So, again, the numbers for Ian Book, 8,948 yards for his career.
Yeah.
Sam Hartman, the last 2 years, Sean, if you just look at the last 2 years, he has thrown for 7,929 yards and 77 touchdowns. He's thrown more touchdowns in the last 2 years than Ian Book through his whole career.
Yeah.
And he's rushed for as many touchdowns as Ian Book did. Now, not the yards Ian Book did.
Yeah.
But even there, for his career, Sam Hartman's rushed for 856 yards in his career and 17 touchdowns. So the production will be there. Can you do it at a place like Notre Dame? Can you do it in the big games? Because here's the thing. For Notre Dame to be here, Sam Hartman will have to at least be 2-1 against Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. At least 2-1, right? Because there's a chance to go 3-0 and get upset by somebody else, right?
Yeah.
But at least 2-1. Those are the kind of money games he didn't have at Wake Forest.
Yeah.
And then what does he do in the playoff? Does he look like he can be that guy there, or does he look like the dude at Wake Forest? You know what I mean? The turnover guy in some big games. Yeah. Those are all going to be things, and that's why he's coming to Notre Dame. That's exactly why he's coming to Notre Dame. Here's a bold prediction here, John. For you, Sean, to respond to. Is 2023 the year that Notre Dame gets 2,000-yard rushers, a 3,000-yard passer, and 2,000-yard receivers? I think yes.
No.
Has anyone ever done that before?
No. They're not getting 2 1,000-yard receivers.
Has that ever happened before? 2,000-yard rushers and 2,000-yard receivers on the same team? Maybe one of those like air raid teams?
I'm sure it's happened before. In the history of college football, it probably has happened before. They almost got 2 1,000-yard rushers this year, so that's not.
Yeah, well, it's the difficulty is doing it with both of them. I'm actually the one team that I thought might have done it. Nope, Oklahoma came close in 2008. Sean, that was the first offense I was going to go to,
right?
Because they had 2,000-yard rushers, DeMarco Murray and Chris Brown. Joaquin Iglesias had 1150 and Jermaine Gresham had 950 that year. He was close.
Yeah.
I was close. So. Now, could Notre Dame get 2,000s, a 3,000-yard passer and a 1,000-yard receiver? Maybe. I don't think Notre Dame's going to have a 1,000-yard receiver next year.
No.
I just think the ball's going to be spread around too much. And I think they're going to be too good running the football.
Yeah.
To do that. I really see a scenario next year, Sean, where the ball's you're going to see maybe a 1,000-yard rusher if maybe they win a playoff game and get a 14th game or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't think we'll see it. Well, I mean, we could see it's not like it's going to be outlandish. It could happen. I just have a feeling the ball is going to get spread around a lot. I think we're going to have games where the running backs are going to have like 9 catches, stuff like that. It's just the ball is going to get spread around a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Here's one, Sean, from Lil Zub. BD, what do you think of the college football landscape the next year? A lot of big-time quarterbacks leaving this year, and Georgia will likely lose more to the NFL. Could next year set up for Notre Dame to finally do this? Yeah. I mean, Sean, we kind of talked about this, right? Like, who is Bama's quarterback going to be next year? Is there a portal quarterback that there's going to have to be somebody jumping in that we don't know about for Bama to get a portal quarterback right now, don't you think? Like, otherwise, it's going to have to be somebody from their current roster. Like, and I don't know they don't have a championship quarterback in their current. I'm sorry, Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson to me are not that guy. And their incoming freshmen aren't those guys either, especially Eli Holstein. He's very overrated.
Yeah. They already moved Jalen Milroe in bowl prep to wide receiver. So
really? Okay.
Yeah.
So who was the guy that would have been? Was it Ty Simpson that would have been the next guy?
Ty Simpson, I think, is the next guy.
Yeah.
You know, they made a run at a big time quarterback.
Yeah. They were throwing bills at Drake May. Let's be real about that. That's
they made a run. So that lets you know what they think they need
right
next year. Because I'll be honest, from a talent standpoint, if they get the right coaching, they're going to be good defensively next year.
Oh, should be. Even with the losses they have.
They're going to be really good defensively next year. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to flow from the coaches. And then if they don't really need a Bryce Young with the talent they have. They need coaches. Coaches.
Well, but see that they do if the coaching doesn't change.
If the coaching doesn't change, yeah.
Right.
So I'm expecting
because that Sean, you went 11-2 with Bryce Young, and you were close to having a couple more losses to not very good teams.
Yeah.
With Bryce Young.
Yeah. And you saw when they were locked in.
Oh yeah.
Against a team that gave TCU struggles.
Yeah. Twice.
You saw Alabama was locked in. It's like
they were toying with Kansas State.
They were absolutely toying with Kansas State. And by the way, the next closest team to do what the previous listener asked was actually 2005 USC.
They had 2,000 receivers that year,
Steve Smith, they had Jared that was over at 1,100, and Steve Smith was at 957.
Oh, okay. So they didn't quite get there.
Right. They didn't quite get there. Dude, do you realize?
That's hard to do. It's hard enough to do with 2,000-yard receivers.
I challenge you to go look at the stats for Reggie Bush and Lindell White that year. Just go.
It's nuts.
I just happened to look at the stats, and I'm like, this is bananas.
It's nuts. I'll say this, Sean. I will say this. If Notre Dame – let me ask you this, Sean, kind of off Lil Zub's question. What speaks better for how good Notre Dame is going to be next year? That they have 2,000-yard rushers and a 1,000-yard receiver, or one rusher of over 1,300 yards and 2,000-yard receivers? What would indicate that Notre Dame is a better team next year? Because I'm going to be honest with you. For me, well, actually, I'll let you answer first. Which is an indication that Notre Dame is going to be a championship caliber team next year? 2,000-yard rushers and a 1,000-yard receiver, or vice versa?
Vice versa.
Okay.
I would go vice versa. Yeah.
Tell me why.
I just think it's a better formula for who Notre Dame is to win a national championship, and it's a better puzzle for them to be able to put together.
Yeah.
But the other, yeah, I'll stick with that. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say.
To me, I think that number one, I actually think it could be hard for Notre Dame to have 2,000-yard rushers next year. I do. Especially if Chris Tyree comes back. Because you're going to throw it a little bit more than you did this year, right? That's part of it. But also between Estime, Diggs, Tyree, and Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, that's going to make it a little harder. And here's the other thing too, Sean, is I expect these guys next year to here's the thing about this year's offense is those guys were basically playing 4 quarters every week. There were no blowouts where the running backs are coming out in the third quarter. We didn't see that, but because even in the UNLV game, Logan Diggs was running that game away in the fourth quarter. BC is really the only game that we really saw them just kind of get that big blowout win, and then that was the snow game, so you were kind of running that one away. But for me, it just I think you can see one guy have 1,100 yards, another guy have 850 yards, another guy have 450 yards, another guy have 300 yards. So I think there's be spread out a little bit. So it could be hard for 2 guys to get to 1,000 for that reason. Now, for me, I'm more confident that the talent is there for them to get to 2,000-yard backs. If Notre Dame's offense is run in a way, and if the offense and if the receiving players step up in a way that leads to 2 guys getting 1,000 yards, I don't know how you stop this team because they're going to be able to run the football. Yeah. It means that they are a big-time, big play receiving core. is what that tells me. It tells me like, Lorenzo goes off and Tobias goes off, or Dion and Tobias go off. Because the reason that got me thinking, Sean, is like, what was the Notre Dame teams that would have had a chance to kind of have that kind of production? And you think, what's the first thing you think of? 05 and 06. They didn't come close to having a second running back to get anywhere near that.
No.
But you think about it, it's like, boy, if I've always said to myself, if that team had the 2012 defense, or the 2018 defense, that Brady team in 05, if you gave them the 2018 Notre Dame defense, that team can play for championship. In my opinion.
Agreed.
Because they can move the ball on anybody. Even Ohio State, they moved the ball on Ohio State.
Yeah.
Offense was not their problem against Ohio State that year. This is giving up over 600 yards of offense to Ohio State was the problem for them that year.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you had 1,000-yard receiver in Mo, 1,000-yard receiver in Samardzija. Fasano had a bunch of yards that year. Like, if you're throwing the ball with that kind of effectiveness, and you've got the two-headed monster at running back, or maybe even three-headed monster at running back, I mean, that tells me this offense is going to be sick. But I don't think it's going to – I think that's the least likely thing to happen, Sean.
The most impressive thing, which is why I said take a look at the stats when you get a chance, they had just as many yards from scrimmage from their running backs as Matt Leinart threw for. Think about that. They combined for over 3,700 yards from scrimmage.
It's a lot. That was an insane offense.
Yeah.
An insane offense in a bad league just makes for some sick yards.
Yeah.
Some really sick production. Let's get this next one, Sean. Is John A1. How does the talent in the Notre Dame receiver room stack up against the Wake Forest receiver room? I ask talent specifically because production is no contest to Wake Forest. It's comparable, actually, to me. They have a good receiving core, Wake Forest does. Like, I would say Notre Dame has better depth, and I think the top-level talent, to me, at Notre Dame is a little better from a pure talent standpoint, but Wake was very experienced this year. But A.T. Perry's a dude, Sean, to me. He's a really good football player. Donovan Green is a really solid football player. Jamal Banks is a really solid football player. Taylor Morin is a really quality slot guy. Like, they have, to me, the combination of – because what makes for talent, right? There's physical talent plus production plus experience. So if you're looking at it from that standpoint, Wake's got the better room right now. Because Notre Dame may have Notre Dame has the better athletes. TCU has the better talent, because talent to me includes route running, ball catching skills, all that kind of stuff. And that's Wake Forest right now. Receiver room. Now, what Wake Forest doesn't have is the tight end room that Notre Dame has, the running back room that Notre Dame has, the offensive line that Notre Dame has. But they weren't hurting for receivers the last couple of years. Now, he made some of those guys look a little bit better, but those guys also made some big-time plays for him too. And when you've got a quarterback that hey, if I just got to go play hard, and I know this guy's going to throw me the ball and give me a chance, you're going to play hard for him. And that's what we saw them do. That's my opinion, Sean. What's your take on
that? Yeah, I mean, talent-wise, we've always differed from a lot of people that felt like there wasn't talent in the Notre Dame wide receiver room. There's definitely talent there. You had Perry, who I think is going to end up probably being a third round pick in the NFL. Yeah. But I don't think just the depth of talent in the room, I don't think he'll have more than he's going to walk into right now. So that would be my comparison to it. Route running and within that system and
the skill.
Yeah. I lean towards Wake Forest on that. But, these wide receivers in this room have really just gotten, 10 months of Chancey Stuckey?
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah.
So,
well, their leading pass catcher this year at running back, Sean, had 6 catches. Right? Their running backs as a whole had 10 catches. Their tight ends as a whole had 33 catches.
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing, is like, it's not just receivers. At Wake, it was just receivers.
Right.
At Notre Dame, it's receivers, tight ends, running backs that are all playmakers in the pass game. Because like I said, you look at their production. Okay, the gap in production at receiver is pretty good for Wake Forest, but the gap in production at all those other positions is just great, if not greater, for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
You look at Notre Dame's running backs this year. I'm just off the top of my head, 43 catches for Notre Dame's running backs this year. 43 catches. And they had 273 plus 484 yards receiving. So 43 catches, 484 yards receiving for Notre Dame's running backs in the pass game, and 5 receiving touchdowns. Wake Forest running backs combined for 11, 14, 15, receptions. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And say 62, 90, 101, 126, 121 yards, 121 receiving yards. Gap isn't close. Their tight ends combined for 33 catches, 294 plus 49. It's about 360-ish or so receiving yards. That's a good month for Michael Mayer. You know what I mean? So that's going to be the key, is that all-around talent. Here's a good one for you, Sean. I'm going to ask you this one because everybody knows my stance on this. Shamrock Sean asked, do you think Charles Jagasaw can win a starting role at right guard or left guard next season?
He's talented enough.
And big enough. Did you hear what did
Ryan Ryan was like, yo. See, when you say big, we're not talking sloppy big.
Right.
He's not a sloppy big kid. He is a well put together big human being. He is one of those. When you see Georgia's interior lineman, you'll see what Charles Jagasaw is like right now.
Like, that's the thing, is they're getting a little bit bigger. Chan's big. Charles Jagasaw's big.
Yeah.
Blake Fisher's big. Sullivan Absher's big. Sam Pendleton's big.
Yeah.
Like, they're just getting bigger, and that's needed for what they want to do running the football. You can't run duo with athletes.
No.
Only. You got to be able to move people.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's also true if you're going to run zone as well. It's nice to have athletes, but you've got to be able to move people.
You got to be able to lean on people, man.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. But yes, can he win one? Easily, yes. Will he win one? That's a little bit more of a tough question.
Yeah.
But yes, can he? Absolutely. Then we have a somewhat related question. Coleman Smith said, what are the reasonings you think Rocco Spindler will get passed up a guard? I heard last show you and Vince predict Kristaps against Route the 20. Will get I think he's already been passed up. And I think he's already been passed up. Look, here's the thing Rocco's been struggling with, Sean, and you guys saw that firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some clips from practice this year that show me the same thing. He's just very slow-footed.
Yep.
And I don't know what's caused that, because he was not slow-footed in high school. I don't know what it is, but he's very slow-footed, and that's created some issues for me. But I just get this notion of Charles Jagasaw and Blake Fisher on the right side, with Billy Schrouth and Joe Alt on the left side, and you start thinking, like, boy, that's a team that's going to move some people next year, boy.
Yeah.
And Zeke Krell up the middle, that's going to move some people, because he's only going to start if he's just that good.
Yeah.
Andrew Christopher's a good football player. If you beat him out, it's because you're really good, in my opinion. No doubt about it. Next question from Logan Thayer. Any discussion from the staff of trying Cam Hart at safety? He's got enough length, and playing more than from depth would help fix his handsiness penalty issues. His penalty issues were only an issue early in the year, Sean, when he was injured. Yeah, he was a little crabby against Carolina and Ohio State, but he was also a kid who was playing with a hamstring injury where he didn't feel he was 100%. You go back and look at the second half of the year, that was not a problem. Yeah, but no, that's not a discussion that they're going to have. Cam Hart's a corner.
That's a little bit of a reach.
Yeah, he's a corner. He's a corner.
Like I said, not understanding what he was. Dude, if you knew what Cam Hart, because I don't want to make a comparison, Cam Hart could have shut it down a long time ago in this season. If you know the things that he played through to be out there,
he wouldn't have played against Ohio State.
You probably would have had a lot more respect for what he was able to do.
Right.
So that's,
Yep.
you know.
And he was still pretty good this year.
Yeah.
Again, all I'll say is go look at his numbers of catches allowed compared to Julian Love, and it's not even close. Teams were way more willing to throw at Julian Love than they are at Cam Hart this year. Not even close.
Yeah.
Here's a very important question here, Sean. I think we should both know the answer to this one. Joshua B., who would win a rap battle, Brian or Sean?
It's about styles,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think Brian is probably more gritty Wu-Tang style, and Brian would be great with the punchlines
The
because
speed.
he knows all of like the movies and the sayings from the
Right.
movies.
Because
So
I'd be like Raekwon the Chef, right? I'd be saying a
yeah,
lot of things that sound really harsh, but they don't make any sense when
yeah,
you string them together, right? Isn't that how Ray? Because like that's how it was with Ray. It was like, yo, this guy is flowing, like, and then
right,
these are slowing. He just said this. That doesn't make any sense.
yeah, yeah. See, that's his style. I'm the backpacker.
I'd have some insults hurled in there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm the backpacker, native tongue, Tribe
Yeah.
Called Quest.
Yeah, I'd
Top.
be the
So
battle rapper,
yeah,
though, Sean. That's the question, though, right?
yeah.
You'd put out better albums. You'd be the better musician. I'd be the battle rapper. I would say some stuff to get to your soul, right? I know something about you. You know what I mean? Like I'd be hurting your soul, man.
Right.
Yeah. Rap battle. I got to go with me on that one, man.
Yeah, I'm cool putting out the better albums.
Who's the better artist? That guy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's like the difference between and one in the NBA. And one does the stuff where it's like, oh, he embarrassed you, and the NBA guy's like, yeah, I'm gonna go cash my $20 million check right now while you drive around in a bus. Because I'm the better artist. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so that's
man.
how it'll be. We get some wild questions on here, man.
That's a funny question.
Shamrock Sean says, Hartman is exciting, but we all know what that can bring. Defense wins chips, though. I don't want to look a little bit better defensively than a Lincoln Riley Oklahoma playoff team. There's a lot of leaps being drawn here, Sean. A lot of leaps being drawn here that I don't make a lot of sense to me. Number one, defenses don't win championships. Like, did you see the score of the semifinal games? 42-41 and 51-45. Stop telling me defense wins championships. Stop. Like, it's not the case. The only two lowest scoring games we've seen in the championship history, Sean, has been the 2 years where we had two SEC teams playing each other.
Yeah, but see, this is something, I'm interested in. I think offensive have exploded in the playoffs because of the preparation that teams get. Like Ryan Day getting a month to prepare for Georgia kind of it just kind of made the advantages he had even greater advantages. Give him that amount of time. I'm very interested. Once expansion happens, bro, and the time to prepare for teams shrinks, because now you get before the first game, you get maybe 2 weeks, and then the next week is a week later. Now I'll be interested in how that affects offense.
Yeah.
In the playoffs moving forward. Because I think it might have a minor impact on offenses, but at the end of the day, defense wins championships does not mean the same thing that it meant.
Yeah.
I think you can say it today, but it doesn't have the same meaning that it had 20 years ago. Today, it means yes. At some point in the game, you have to have a defense good enough to get consecutive stops.
Yep.
Against a good offense.
Georgia, Ohio State.
Absolutely.
Perfect example.
If you can get consecutive stops at the important time of the game, your defense just helped you win that championship.
Yep.
Absolutely.
But that's not how people mean it.
No.
And that's why you got to be able to score.
Yeah.
Got to be able to score.
Yeah.
Next question. What are your thoughts on DJ Brown's return from Brett Lott?
I'm glad he's returning.
They needed him back.
He's returning. Yeah. I mean, look, good kid. You can debate at what level of safety you think he is. He's going to give you depth. He's going to give you leadership. It's like there is no negative to having him on the roster. If he's going to be backup depth, Because for the most part, this
But he
season
was in the
is,
bowl game.
yeah, he probably played as well this year than he's played at Notre Dame. And I'm not sitting here debating with anybody whether or not that was great or he still wasn't as good as you would like him to be. I'm just saying for who he is and what he continues to do, that's the type of kid you want on your roster at Notre Dame. And if he's going to be depth and backup, I don't see what the complaint
Because
is.
who else are you going to play? Like somebody said, you got to play the young guys. What young guys?
The young guys
It's
are playing.
Ramon. It's Ramon, DJ, and Xavier, and freshmen.
Yes,
Like you do not want to go into a season where you have to play freshmen.
yes, and
If
he
Adon
adds.
Schuler and Ben Minich earn playing time, great. Just like
Yes,
Benjamin Morrison.
yeah,
When you play a guy because you have to play a guy, that's when you get in trouble.
yeah.
That's when you get in trouble.
And who's going to be? This is my thing. This is so important. We talked about it with Caleb Smith. We talk about it with DJ. With all the stars that have come through that safety room in the last 2 years, or perceived stars, because there was really only one star. That was a guy that came through this year that thought he was going to be a star, thought he was a star, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Sean, did you see this? I just got a release on this. The NFF, it's the National Football Foundation, and the College Football Hall of Fame today announced 18 new members to the College Football Hall of Fame.
Nice.
Reggie Bush was one. Dwight Freeney was one. Eric Berry, Michael Bishop, some names, Bryant McKinney, Corey Moore, Troy Vincent, Tim Tebow, Brian Westbrook, D'Angelo, and Michael Stonebreaker.
Nice.
Yep.
Congrats to
Linebacker from Notre
Stone.
Dame. Yep.
Well deserved. Yep. Well deserved.
Yep.
Well deserved. Congrats
yep.
to 42.
Absolutely.
Congrats
Absolutely.
to 42.
So that's a big one. Another member of the Notre Dame Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Of the Hall of Fame from Notre Dame. Just adds to what is already an impressive resume.
But there is no better representation that I will have Adon Schuler, Ben Minich, and anybody else walking into that room to learn how to play football at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Than DJ Brown.
Yeah. Agree. It just, there's no reason not to bring him back.
No.
The only problem, it's like with a lot of things, the only problem is if you're just going to guarantee him a number one safety role.
Yeah.
But that's not what they're doing. He didn't even have that when the season ended.
No, he didn't. And see, that's something that people don't understand when it comes to putting together a roster, putting together a program. You have need of guys like DJ Brown that in your eyes as a fan, if he's not producing stats, you might not see his worth.
Yeah.
But he has tremendous worth.
Right.
In that locker room and in that program.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Jonathan Gabrick says, here's a question for you, Sean. What do you want the Bears to do with the number one pick, and who would you draft? Well, first of all, you get to trade Justin Fields for 3 number ones. I saw that on Twitter yesterday.
That's not happening.
In your response to you, I got a kick out of
the fact that he thought Justin Fields was worth 3 number ones right now.
Yeah,
was hilarious within itself.
Some really interesting takes out there in the Twitter world, man.
I don't know what GM you're talking to.
Yeah. Well, man, the Broncos might do it, dude. They just gave up 2 for Russell Wilson, and he's about 34 years old. You know what I mean? Like, Broncos would have like the number 2 pick right now if it wasn't for flipping a trade.
I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. I think there are going to be 3 teams that offer up packages for the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
I think the Texans are, in order to guarantee if they get the quarterback they want, they're going to have to put a package together to move from 2 to 1. The Colts are going to have a new coach. He's going to want a new quarterback. They're going to put together a package from the 4th spot to move up to number 1. And as always, you're probably going to have a team from outside the top 10 that's desperate for a quarterback that's going to put together a package to try and move up. Now, the package with them is probably going to have to include players.
Sure.
To be able to make that jump. 1 and 4, I would probably choose the Colts package because that will be more moving up that
And
many
you still get a
picks,
high draft pick, yeah.
and you still stay at 4 to end up with Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, which is what you really need defensively.
Right.
So, and then I think the Colts have the 4th and the 32nd or the 31st, if I'm not mistaken. I know they have 2 first-round picks. So that will give you 2 first-round picks. You probably pick up a first-round pick next year, and you probably pick up
because the
more
Bears
picks.
technically have 2 first-round picks as well.
Yes,
technically,
yeah,
because their 33rd pick moves up to 32.
right,
right. Because the Dolphins, because hey, the NFL actually punishes teams severely for tampering. Imagine that.
Yeah,
imagine that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Sean, because again, I don't follow. Do you think you've seen enough from Justin Fields to say he has a shot to still be a good NFL quarterback?
Have I seen enough? See, that's not
to say he has a shot. You know what? Like,
no, let me tell you why I say no, because I think the staff.
Again, I don't have a response to that. I haven't watched him.
The staff he had previously was terrible, and I don't like Luke Getsy as a play caller.
Okay,
and that's who he has now. So, physically, I know
that's what I'm referring
to. Physically, I know he can
right.
He can do what Jalen Hurts has done.
So you feel like if you get the right people around him, he can win in the NFL.
The right people.
So there isn't a need to try to trade him and take the quarterback number 1. No. They're in a pretty good situation, in my opinion. If I'm the Texans, I'm not trading up to number 1. I'm just saying whichever quarterback is there, I'm taking.
Absolutely.
I know you're a Bryce Young guy, but the gap isn't so great that it's worth Bryce Young and losing other picks.
Yeah.
Like, give me CJ Stroud and whatever I'd have to give up, which is going to be pretty good value, over just Bryce Young is the way I look at it. But I'm standing firm.
Yeah.
The Colts is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah.
They got to do something to create some energy in that franchise. I just don't know who that guy's going to be.
Yeah, that's my concern. And if I think who's that? Yeah, Rob Titoff is right. Because you pointed out the punishment, but they traded that pick that would have been a second-round pick.
Oh, that's right, to the Steelers.
They traded for Chase Claypool. So, which is still, people are down on Chase Claypool. Look, dude, relax.
Mm-hmm.
Give him a full off season to learn the system. Yeah. Once again, I don't like Luke Getsy as a play caller. I can tell you that. I can tell you that right now. And honestly, that's something they need to look at. Honestly, and I know it's only been a year, but for my taste, he's not it.
Yeah,
he's not it. So they're losing David Montgomery. They have over $100 million in cap space and free agency. 8 picks without the extra picks that they may pick up from a trade. At this point, if you're a GM, you're in a position where you can't mess this up. But Bears fans have said that before. Because they had the number 2 pick in the draft, and they said, there's no way we can mess this up. Deshaun Watson is right there. Patrick Mahomes is right there. And they took Mitch Trubisky.
1-year wonder. 1-year starter.
Matter of fact, they traded up 1 pick because they thought somehow, some way the 49ers were going. Yeah. So even with Ryan Poles, you're in a position where it seems like you can't mess it up. But hey, we've seen it done by the Bears before. So
yeah. Here's one for you, Sean, from Joshua B. Brian and Sean, is Clarence Lewis moving to safety a discussion the staff is having, or is it just we're hoping for from the outside looking in?
I think at this point, wouldn't that have to be something that if Clarence in his mind says, yo, on the next level, this is something I need to do to make myself more palatable for NFL scouts in the NFL, then okay, let's have the discussion. Let's talk about it. I don't know if that's something that they're going to initiate. Honestly, it should be something that Clarence should think about.
To me, Sean, somebody has to force that move. I think you and I got actually it's on my list of things to do. I'm going to write an article about this week at Irish Breakdown because it's going to require Chance Tucker, Christian Gray, Micah Bell, Ryan Barnes, somebody to come out and say, hey, I need to play. And the only way you can get me on the field is by moving, either benching Clarence or moving Clarence. That's where it's got to come from. And then the pitch to Clarence has to be, hey, man, you're going to still play a ton. You might even play more than you would have. But the reality is, Sean, I think you and I agree on this. He is a better NFL prospect at safety. He's not an NFL cornerback at all.
No.
He can be an NFL safety, whether it's a depth player or even as a starter. I think Clarence Lewis is a good football player. I just don't think he can flip his hips and run the way you need to. He's got a lot of Julian Love in him in that regard. Like, Julian Love was a really good college cornerback. And I think that actually Clarence could do well in the system that they asked Julian to play in. But this isn't that system. This is a cover one. Like, I remember when they tried to go after he had a great 2017, the first game of 2018, Notre Dame was like, yeah, we can trust Julian. He's going to do more man now. What did, like, the first game, Michigan just smokes him for like a 50-yard gain at the post. I'm like, okay, enough of that. And that whole offseason, Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool just abused him in practices because he's just not a man guy.
Yeah.
He is a keep things in front of you. I'm really smart. I can play the football kind of guy. And then that's allowed him to be I've had some people tell me he's a borderline Pro Bowler this year at safety. Julian, he can never been that as a cornerback.
Yeah.
And I think Clarence has a little bit of that. I don't know if it's saying he's as good as Julian, but we can keep things in front of him and play downhill and play in space like that. He's a good football player. Yeah. He's just not a flip your hips, open up and cover, play man coverage kind of guy.
Yeah.
To me.
I agree.
To me.
And can I respond with something I see in the chat? Goes back to the last question. It's like, this is just a little tidbit that I know for a fact. Yes, the Bears wanted Deshaun Watson. It was Deshaun Watson, and then it was Patrick Mahomes, and then it was Mitchell Trubisky. The scouts and the coaching staff. Ryan Pace had Mitchell Trubisky number one. There was a battle going back and forth. John Fox was the head coach at that time. So they really didn't have a true quarterback evaluator on the staff. But even John Fox wanted Deshaun Watson just from strictly watching him against Alabama back-to-back years. Ryan Pace literally went behind the back of the scouts and the entire staff, made the trade, and sent the pick in.
Yeah.
So he could never say, there was no way he could ever pin Mitchell Trubisky on anybody else.
Right.
He could never do it. He could never say, we're our scouts. No. Everybody in the building either wanted Mahomes or Deshaun Watson on the scouting staff and the coaching staff. He went rogue.
Yep.
He went rogue, made the trade, and took Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah.
So, and that, you can take that to the bank. I think John Fox has been pretty vocal about that whole process after
as he should be. Chicago. As he should be. Like, you basically cost me my job.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Because as much as you want to talk about the happy endings thing and everything that's happened with Deshaun Watson, you take those 3 years where he was playing Pro Bowl ball and put that with that defense they had with Khalil Mack, who knows what happens in Chicago.
Right. No doubt. Let's go to this next one, Sean. It's from Jared Michael. Did anyone listen to Freeman about Hartman on the All-American Bowl game interview? I think he's a big Hartman fan. I think it's more so, Sean, to me, Marcus Freeman knows the Notre Dame coaching staff is very well aware. They have a much better, I'll put it to you like this. I'm trying to say this. I'm struggling with this because I don't want to say something wrong because I love Drew Pine.
Yeah.
I love that family.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of self-awareness in that coaching room of how limited they were at that position this year.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. I think it's the best way to say it. And they understand that they were able to win some games and be in other games. When they were in the USC game, they were in the Ohio State game with very limited play at quarterback in those two games.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment of it.
And he understands that this is a major upgrade.
Yeah.
And again, some people saying like, "Oh, if he was so good, he'd be in the NFL." This is college football, and number one. And again, I'll remind you: look at who's playing in tonight's games. Number two, and number three is Notre Dame doesn't need that at quarterback. They need competency, number one, and then they need a guy that can make some plays with his arm, and that's what this kid brings to the table. In my opinion.
Yes,
potentially.
As you mentioned earlier, plenty of self-awareness in the building.
Yeah.
And little ego. Because the ego will have you say, we can coach.
Yeah.
We can coach. Don't worry about it. We're good.
I'll develop my guy.
We'll develop my guy.
Right.
No, man. It's like, look, man, I know we're a great staff, but we're walking into this fight with a sword facing cannons. And
well, let's say something else too, Sean, is you and I both know for a fact Marcus Freeman and Tommy Reese are incredibly high on Tyler Buchner.
Yes.
Incredibly high.
Yes.
There's two things that this move tells us. Number one is there's legitimate concerns about Tyler's ability to stay healthy.
Yeah.
And how not staying healthy has limited his development. There's legit concern about that, number one. Number two, this team truly believes they're a couple pieces away from making a run in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can disagree with them, not you, Sean, but like just in general, generally speaking, you can disagree with them, but they believe that genuinely.
Yeah.
That this team has a chance to make a run for championship. Because they look at it like we played like crap against USC and we're in that game. We played like crap against Ohio State and we're in that game. And when we just played relatively well against Clemson, we destroyed them.
Yeah.
When we've played our game this year, we blow people off the field. Look what they did in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Right? Like BC was coming off, like, you know how bad BC looked against Notre Dame? They were coming off a win over a top 20 team the week before.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, when they play their game, Sean, they are phenomenal. The problem is when they weren't playing their game, they were just like a really up and down team. And a lot of that came down to quarterback play. And they beat Clemson 35-14 with a quarterback that threw for less than 90 yards.
That's when you know you're at a championship level. Like you don't want to have to ask your team to play an A/B+ game every week. You can't sustain that throughout a CFB season.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't. It's just rare. I mean, you have some rare teams that I think you can go back and say 10 out of 12 games they brought their A game. There's probably some special teams that were able to do that.
Or you got to at least bring your B game consistently. Georgia brought their B to B+ game a lot this year.
And they had two stinkers, like Kent State and Missouri, right off the top of my head, where I don't think they played particularly well against Auburn.
Or Georgia Tech.
To be honest.
But those are games where it's like those teams are so bad, it's hard to get up for that game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they didn't play great in some of the other games, Sean.
When you can play a B- game against a really good team and still win, that says a lot about your program. That says a lot. I don't think Notre Dame needed an A game to beat USC this year.
Yeah.
They didn't need their A game. If they had just played a B game against USC on the road.
On both sides of the ball.
On both sides of the ball, they would have been in that game and probably would have walked away with a victory.
Yeah. Let's get these last couple here, Sean. David Nagel, do you think Notre Dame will incorporate some mesh into the game plan? No.
Heck, no.
No. Sam Hartman would be so pissed about that. That's part of the reason he's leaving Wake Forest.
Yeah.
It does not fit with what they do running football, and they don't need to do it. And Wake Forest has to do that to be good enough to win games because they can't stop anybody else from scoring. They've got to score crazy amounts, but it exposes you and leaves you vulnerable. No, they will not be doing that. A buddy of mine, Vince, texted me and he said he was listening to a podcast that was talking about them doing that. I was like, nope, not happening. You will not see that. Coleman Smith has a question. He goes, actually, we already addressed that one a little bit, so get to that here. Connor Nepper says, what's up, fam? How you doing, Connor? Say the wide receiver room and linebacker D-line play improves greatly this offseason. We should be looking at 11-1, 12-0. The 23 season is up for grabs. I agree. I think 23 reminds me a lot of last year, Sean, where there just really weren't – like the last 2 years, whoever wins a title tonight, and you look at Georgia last year, those teams get boat raced by 2018 Clemson.
Yeah.
Those teams get boat raced by 2019 LSU, and those teams get boat raced by 2020 Alabama. There was a stretch there, in my opinion, for 3 years where you saw some of the best teams ever do it in the last 50 years play.
Yeah.
That's not been the norm. 2014 Ohio State was not like that. 2015 Bama was not like that. 2016 Clemson was not like that. 2017 Bama was not like that. We just went through an anomaly stretch of 3 years where there just was some crazy good teams. Like 2018 Clemson, in my opinion, would smack 2016 Clemson. 2016 Clemson was a very flawed team with a great quarterback.
Yeah.
2018 Clemson was a very, very sound all-around team with a great quarterback. You know what I mean? And that was the difference. And so, 2020 Alabama, especially with the COVID stuff, was just probably the worst of those three teams, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Probably the least, but they were really good offensively. Somebody said it was one of the greatest receiver rooms earlier, because I had said that Mac Jones had to carry that team to a degree, and I think people are misunderstanding what I'm saying. Number one, when Slade Bolden is a starting receiver for you, you do not have a generational receiving core. You're thinking of the year before when they had, in the 2 years before when they had Henry, Ruggs, and Jerry Jeudy. Got to remember, 2020, Jalen Waddle missed like half the year.
He did.
Because he was injured. You had Slade Bolden starting. John Mechie was a good player, and Devontae Smith was phenomenal. But what I'm referring to is Mac Jones' ability to get the ball where it needed to go and make checks and do all that kind of stuff was elite. He could do things with his mind that had the same impact that other players do with their bodies. Like Trevor Lawrence couldn't do things like that in 2018. He had to do things with his body because he was a freshman, where Sam Hartman was a senior who could just get in and out of the right play, get the ball. I mean, he was so pinpoint with his as a passer that you just like, okay, man, they're just doing some things here. But the last 2 years we haven't seen that, and I don't see that kind of team emerging next year, Sean. I just don't. I think we're back to what it normally is, which is really good teams, and the top teams are good but vulnerable.
Yeah,
in my opinion. I think this might be. Let me see if there's any more that kind of came up here real quick. Let's see here. It was 2018 Clemson that beat Alabama 44. It was 44-16, I believe, is the score of that game. All right. Let's get to these last. They've got two kind of questions here from Brent Smith. Actually, we're just going to do one of them. He says, Brent says, Brian, I'm a little concerned with the talent level of the two players we signed from the transfer portal. The wide receiver and nickel safety were 2-star rated rivals. What say you? What I say is I do not care what Rivals says about a recruit. Like, this kid's been a 4-year player in the Big 12. Why are we still talking about his recruiting ranking? Nobody cares. Right? What was Khalil Mack's ranking coming out of high school, Sean?
2-star.
So should I be worried about Khalil Mack if my NFL team got drafted Khalil Mack? Should I be worried about his talent because he was a 2-star player?
He turned out pretty good at Buffalo to me.
Right. I mean, yeah, he was a 4.92 star. Notre Dame signs kickers with higher grades than that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, once you get to college, you're no longer defined by your recruiting ranking. You're defined by what you do. Right? Like, there's 5 stars that could transfer to Notre Dame that are like,
Well, Brent, you have the same concern that Kirby Smart has about his safeties tonight. And they're 5 stars, 4 and 5 stars.
Right.
So,
I mean,
I don't, like you said, all we can say is go watch the games we referenced earlier.
The starting quarterback for Georgia tonight, too, by the way, Sean, 2-star. Stetson Bennett was a 2-star coming out of high school.
Yeah.
You're defined by what you are in college, not what your recruiting rankings say you were.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So just like I said, there has been times where like there's 5, because this is what happens, right? Who are the guys that get fans excited when they jump in the portal? Some name they already knew, some 5-star name they already knew. And I'm like, yeah, but that guy's not good though.
Yeah.
Well, he may have been a 5-star, but he's not good. Ohio State's 2014 team is a perfect example of this. If I say to you, hey, Alabama had a 5-star, Ohio State had a 5-star linebacker that year. You're like, who was it? Darren Lee? No. Josh Perry? No. Curtis Grant. He was their 3rd best linebacker. He rotated all year with a true freshman. Curtis Grant wasn't a 5-star college football player. He was a 5-star recruit. Their best linebacker that year was Darren Lee, who was a 3-star recruit.
Yeah.
Right? You're defined.
Darren Lee actually was going to be decent in the pros until he got hurt.
Yeah.
I think he went to the Jets, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe 7 of Ohio State's 11 starters on that 2014 team that won a title were 3 stars.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
Defined by how many 2-3 stars do you think TCU's putting on the field tonight? There's a few.
Yeah.
There's a few. Here's somebody said, great case in point. We wanted Sam Hartman over DJ Uiagalelei. Stars don't mean anything after you get to college. That's a great example, Sean. There were some people that I know that genuinely wanted Notre Dame to look at DJ Uiagalelei and say, why? Because he's really talented. He was a 5-star. Like, do you watch football games though? I mean, his recruiting ranking should no longer matter to you.
No.
There's a very clear track record of who he is that you can
Plenty
point
of film.
Right. So, yeah, Brent, for me, I mean, I get it. It's fair. Because I mean, in Brent's defense, he's probably not like watching the all 22 film this whole weekend of Thomas Harper like I am. So what's he going to do? He's going to look at things, statistics, recruiting rankings. I get it. Totally get it. But for me, you're no longer defined by who you were in high school when you went to college.
Yeah.
Both ways. If you were a 5-star in high school, it doesn't matter. Are you a 5-star now or not? And vice versa.
I mean, look, Florida State, they went and got this kid. You might have heard of him. He came from an FCS. His name was Jared Verse. He was in the FCS. He's a top 15 NFL pick this year. And he
0-star.
And he chose to go back. He was a what 0-star? He's a 0-star?
Didn't even grade from rivals.
Yeah, but he's going top 15 if he goes into the draft this year.
Yeah. I still can't believe he chose to go back. That was huge for Florida State.
Look, man.
Huge for Florida State.
It's like just go watch TCU versus Oklahoma State and just watch them play.
Right. It's a good football player.
Play. That's all.
And Baylor games, another one that I broke down this week, and I'd encourage you to watch. That would absolutely be what I would say. Yeah. So again, I get the question, Brent. I do, because you look at it. You got to look at. I mean, you're not someone who probably is breaking down film like we do. We're not saying this kid's a 5-star either.
No,
I'm not saying that. He's not going to come to Notre Dame and be a number 1 pick. So I say he's not Denzel Ward. This kid's a good football player that fits the role that they're looking for really, really well. And that's the important thing. So that's what I'm excited about. Again, these are going to be very important pieces. We're not saying that he's going to step into the mix next year and be Julian Love or Benjamin Morrison. They already have Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart. Right. This is the piece that they needed, right? Caleb Smith's not going to be asked to be Will Fuller.
Nope.
Doesn't need to be. We've already seen him, however. He was an honorable mention All-ACC player this year. So his recruiting ranking shouldn't matter anymore. He had like 9 catches for like 150-some yards against Pitt this year. It's pretty good. Pitt's got a pretty good defense. So those are the things that, at this point in time, those are the things that matter. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that matter most to me. And that's why I'm good. But again, we're not asking Caleb Smith to come in and be Michael Floyd. No. That's not what they're asking him to do.
No.
So that's it. So, Sean, that's going to do it for today's show. Great reintroduction. Remember before the show, you were talking about we got to be done like in less than 2 hours. So
that's why I just went ahead and say, you know what? This is not happening.
Let's go and move that appointment.
The Sam Hartman topic went 1 hour.
I had a feeling. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Hit that like button, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. If you're listening via podcast app, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. Check out our main website at irishbreakdown.com. Sign up for the message board, the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. If you have not already done so, make sure you subscribe to the CFB Nation podcast, because you know what you can find every day on the CFB Nation podcast. That Dude Show, the Lucky Lefty podcast. Hosted by Sean Davis, and of course with Lucky Lefty, Malik Zaire. So you can get that podcast every day. Sean, you guys record your shows. Today you didn't have a show because Malik had some prior obligations.
He's texting me now saying he wants to do a show.
He wants to do a show now? Well, here's the great thing about it. When they finish that show, they are going to be able to go immediately edit it, do all that, and publish it and get it up on the podcast app. So you're definitely going to check that out.
Yeah.
And Sean, are you going to be going to be able to do that thing that we talked about?
Yeah,
you're going to be down with that, so we can announce that now. Okay. Yeah. So tonight during the national championship game, which begins, it's an 8 o'clock or 7:30.
No, they're coming on at 6:30 Eastern.
Okay, so the game starts at 7:30 Eastern. So we'll probably get started around 7:30. We're going to do a live in-game show during the championship game, but we're not doing it here on Irish Breakdown. We're going to do it on CFB Nation. Yeah. So if you have not subscribed to CFB Nation, make sure that you do that because we're going to go live today. We're going to try to make it live. We've got a couple things, a couple hurdles. So we're going to try to make it live on CFB Nation, but that is our goal for tonight is to go live on CFB Nation. So if we can't get that work, then we're going live here at Irish Breakdown. So definitely check all that out. So again, CFB Nation, subscribe to the podcast because that's where you can get all of Lucky Lefty podcasts on there. So, and Sean, you do what we do. You could break them down into different segments and things like that to make them a little bit easier to digest.
Absolutely.
So definitely check that out, everybody. So for Sean Davis, I'm Brian Driscoll. Y'all have a great rest of your day, and we will see you again very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.